meeting for USD 230 to order. Rachel, please collect the roll.
Mrs. Milius? Here. Mr. Ewing? Mrs. Sealing?
Here.
Mr. Hoffman?
Present.
Mr. Updike?
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second. It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any discussion or comment?
Yes, I just want to clarify that the agenda item down below, let me find the number, the discussion, what number is it? 9.04, process for selection and approval of instructional materials will include a conversation about the unapproved health textbook at this high school.
Yeah, that's the driver for having that on the agenda, is to have a discussion as to what caused that to be there.
Okay, and then also the follow-up to it and just action steps following it, what our plans are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's where we give guidance and direction to administrators as to what our next steps are.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Sealing?
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Milius?
Yes.
Mr. Ewing?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, very good. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. At this point, we want to review, just put fresh in our minds the vision and the mission for USD 230. And so we spend a moment just to refresh our understanding that the vision is to maintain small town values and empower each student to achieve world-class success. And our mission is to be a school district that engages students to learn, create, adapt, and succeed in an ever-changing world. So keep those at the top of our mind as we work through our agenda this evening. So moving on to good news, recognitions, and announcements. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, we do have quite a few that I want to point out this evening. Always a lot of great things happening across USD 230. First and foremost, as for about academics, I want to say congratulations to Spring Hill High School student Rylan O'Hanlon, as that student was named a semifinalist in the 2024 National Merit Scholarship Program, which again is a very prestigious scholarship program that first and foremost, you have to be very engaged in academics. You have to take a qualifying test, and your score has to be in the top 2% of all students that took that test across the entire United States. So again, congratulations to Rylan O'Hanlon for that honor, his being named a National Merit finalist. We also want to say congratulations to the Marching Broncos for earning the Grand Champion Award a couple weeks ago at Baker University Marching Festival. They also competed this last weekend at the Kansas Bandmasters at KU. And then also our very own first year, Mr. Tristan Bartley, our director of bands. He was named a recipient by the Kansas Bandmasters Association, with one of two recipients being named and given the Young Bandmaster Award. So again, congratulations to the Broncos as well as their director. Again, they work very hard, and their marching season it's about to wind down. If you've been to the football games and seen their performances, you can tell they put a lot of work and pride into that. We also want to give a big shout out to Prairie Creek Elementary School. I went out there this afternoon and they had a surprise presentation for a teacher out there, Michaela Garcia. She was recognized by Ottawa University as their Outstanding Mentor Teacher Award. They try to recognize an individual that has been a mentor to to a first-year teacher prior years, and the student teacher actually has to nominate them over time. And anyway, they came out today and presented this afternoon, kind of a surprise at a staff meeting, Michaela with that award, and also gave her balloons and the certificates, as well as, an honorarium for that honor to go treat herself. So again, it's good veterans helping take care and mentor our younger professionals that are coming in as well. The Lady Bronco volleyball team at Spring Hill High School continues to have an outstanding season. This past weekend, they won the Class 5 sub-state competition and will now move on and compete this weekend at the state tournament for Class 5, which will be held in Salina, Kansas. And the Lady Broncos will actually begin pool play this Friday morning at around 8:30 a.m. Best of luck to them. Moving on to cross country. Cross country teams have also had a great season, and they had a good showing this past Saturday at regionals. Both teams, the boys and the girls, have qualified for the Class 5 state meets, which will be held at Rimrock, Lawrence this coming Saturday. At regionals, the Spring Hill boys finished second as a team, while the Spring Hill girls finished third. But also noteworthy is the fact that the regional boys champion at the regional on this past Saturday in the 5K race was Spring Hill's own Kalen George. I think his mama is proud out here in the audience somewhere. He ran a time of 16:12. And I can tell you, because I've watched cross country for a lot of years, 16, anytime you can run in the 16 minutes range for 3.1 miles is phenomenal. And then to be on the low end of the 16 is even better. So again, congratulations to them, and we wish both the boys and girls good luck this weekend. We also, the boys soccer winding down their season, they actually will begin their regional play tomorrow evening. And they go on the road and will face J.C. Harmon High School at 6 p.m. Best of luck to them. And then our varsity football team, again, begins their postseason play this coming Friday, and they will actually host first-round playoff game at Bronco Stadium, 7 o'clock kickoff on Friday against Leavenworth. So again, best of luck to them. And finally, I did attend a week ago tonight the fall orchestra concert that was held last Monday. And each of the orchestras from the middle school, the high school, played several songs, and then they all came together, and they even asked me to participate with them. I didn't play an instrument. And actually, again, was a great evening there at the fall orchestra concert, and it was very enjoyable. Again, we got a lot of great activities that go on. We try to find something that all of our students are able to find a niche in. And again, this past fall is evident. We're kind of between seasons now, and over the next few weeks, like I said, that will completely wind down, and we'll be gearing up for a full slate of winter activities. And now for our What's Going Well video that we have, at least once a month. This time we're going to feature a short video on what's been going well this school year thus far at Timber Sage Elementary School.
So what's really going well at Timber Sage Elementary is our staff is doing amazing things.
So this month is Begin with the End in Mind. So each of my students made a vision board of what they want to be when they grow up, and I took a picture of them and it's on their poster, and then they also got to just add some photos from Google with what they wanted to be when they grow up. I have a lot of sports players, a lot of singers. It was great vision board and for them to get every time they go to special for lunch.
We had a Red Friday every Friday where students could wear their chief gear or red, and the class who had the most red on got to have the golden football in their classroom, and then the grade level who had the most red on got to keep the Chiefs flag hanging in their pod.
What's going well? Our fourth graders are getting ready for our fourth grade program that's called Pirates. So that's what we are working on. And in December, we will be putting that on for their parents, and it's going to go really well.
One of the programs we're doing right now is the book fair. Students and families can come in and shop for great books. The book fair benefits our book vending machine, where every student in the school
gets a free book for their birthday. Every Friday, we have a school-wide assembly in the gym, and I get to be the MC of the show. And it's so fun because we have PTO come in and they talk about exciting events going on within the school. And lastly, we've been having the Bronco football players, the seniors. We've had Holden and Hagan coming in every Friday. They have been greeting kids outside in the morning to start their day off on the right foot. Go Broncos. We love it here.
And that's my good news announcements. Congratulations.
Several good things going on there. Thank you, Dr. Trout. Moving on to the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes of the October 9th, 2023 regularly stated meeting, the clerk's report, treasurer's report, payroll and claims, personnel, and a copy paper order. Any questions or discussion around the consent agenda?
I've got a quick question on the copy paper order. How many, is that a year's worth or 5 years worth or? What is that?
Not as long as you would think, but Mr. Elliott will give you an update on what the history there is, have the frequency of that. It has seen a decrease more than likely because of the more we move to online, but there's still a lot of copy paper used in all school districts. But Mr. Elliott, you can definitely might tell us a little bit about the frequency.
It's copy paper is kind of a feast and famine situation in a school district. We might go months and months and not even have an order. Now that we're doing the warehousing of that paper, we are the paper vendor for the rest of the schools. So we're able to buy it by the semi-load. The last order was summer of 22.
Mhm.
So we've gone a little over a year before we needed
We
an
order
order.
a semi-load then? Or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Because that's where we get the break. It's almost $5 a case
Yeah.
by having it come straight from the factory.
Real money.
Yeah.
And like everything else, that paper has gone up too over the last several years.
Now, Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second. It's moved and seconded for approval of the consent agenda. Any final questions or comments? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Abstain.
approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to business with individuals. We do have two cards. Just to both folks on these cards, as the Board of Education provides an opportunity during the public portion of, or public comment, public participation portion of a regularly stated meeting. And those conversations happen within the board's authority, and they always happen near the beginning of the meeting. I would note that based on Kansas law, the board will not hear any personal complaints concerning any student, employee, or group of employees of the district during an open session. So all student and personnel matters are referred to administration, which will then be reported to the board in executive session. The board president has the prerogative to place a time limit on public participation remarks, which is generally 5 minutes. And so our board clerk will manage the time on that. And I would call Jamie Rainey. You can come up to the microphone. Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for your time tonight. I'm going to be brief. I know that time is limited. I am not going to say the name of any children. I'm not going to mention any staff. I do want to bring up something that was brought to my attention by a group of children who are in the school. They had mentioned their discomfort with a particular piece of learning material, a book. And I got a chance to see it. I did see it up at the high school and was pretty shocked. Very shocked. I took that information back. I showed it to as many people as I possibly could, and decided that I needed to see the book again, as well as the curriculum previous to this book. I understand this book was purchased in July of this year. When I looked at the book again, I'm going to talk about what I saw that was in there that I had concerns about, and information about the sex lives of college students, including how many times they engaged in vaginal, oral, and anal sex in the last 30 days and in the last year, pornography, safe sex in cyberspace, outer course, which is penetrative sex. I'm sorry, I'm speaking having a little trouble here. Fetishism, exhibitionism, voyeurism, asking students how they compare with the statistics about masturbation. There was a section on friends with benefits as well as hooking up, fantasy, sharing a statistic about like 90% of girls have lost their virginity by the time they were 18. And I can't imagine as a student reading that, how I would feel. All of these things. A section about fantasy, a section on friends with benefits as well as hooking up, explaining the 4 stages of coming out, referring the students to online resources that don't mention parents. I think that is probably a dangerous precedence to set. A section about the gender spectrum, which shares how we've evolved beyond 2 genders, defining and discussing transgender, cisgender, bisexual, pansexual, etc. Saying that bisexual and lesbians drink more than heterosexual females, which I think is a very odd thing to say. And I think that's a weird assumption to make. I don't know about you. Tips for creating a healthy sex life. And again, we are talking about minors. Beyond, and I mean, that is not an exhaustive list. So I feel kind of, I hate to say this in a public forum, but this is what was in the book. Questioning students if they've had their vaccines, including the COVID shot, and discussing rational suicide and the right to die. I think rational suicide is, especially given the state of mental health, for students over the last however long. I think that's I think parents should be involved in this. And there were only enough of those books to be left in the classroom. So they never would have come home. And I never would have known about this unless students told me about it. That is worrisome to me. I did get the chance to look at a board meeting from the 13th of September, 2021. And about the 2-hour and 15-minute mark, there are some questions about, hey, parents want to be reassured that these kinds of things are not making it into the curriculum. These kinds of things are not making it into the textbooks and the materials that our students have access to. And they did. We were told in that there was a section in there where there was a response that was like, hey, we have a process in place. It's the IF policy. And you guys got to review a math book. So, don't worry, you get to review everything. But what I found is in that policy, if you look online, and I never would have looked at it except for what happened with this and hearing that board meeting, but that policy talks about a $20,000 limit. And so I guess because this was under $20,000 is what I was told, that it didn't need to be reviewed. I have a lot of concerns. I have a lot of questions. I've had some questions I put forward, and I'm so grateful that you answered those. But I still have questions like, where was this funded? Who approved this? I still have questions that haven't been answered. I am grateful that this was acted on quickly, but what I can tell you for sure is that from the time school started until it was pulled, which is around the 27th, I believe, students saw it. That's how I found out. They saw it. And they can read. They're not blind. They read it. It's disturbing. In that meeting from the 13th, it talked about how we want our students to have that wasn't benevolent, wasn't the word that was used, but an education where you would not know which side, which political side. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in to speak.
Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks for coming in and expressing your concern.
Thank you, Jamie. We appreciate you.
Moving on to Charlotte O'Hara.
Thank you. Charlotte O'Hara, 15712 Windsor Street, Overland Park.
I'm a taxpayer in the Spring Hill School District. I own property at 178th and Lackman. And so I was informed about this book, and the name of the book is An Invitation to Health. And I'm extremely impressed with Jamie Rainey that she took it upon herself. A mother took it upon herself to investigate this and to research this. And that after 2 visits with staff, that it was quickly removed. But I have a background in education, degree in education. I homeschooled. I can't believe that this type of curriculum would be, I mean, it's just beyond my wildest dreams that this would be in Spring Hill. And you're talking about community standards. I have knocked on a lot of doors in Spring Hill, and I will tell you that this does not adhere to the community standards of Spring Hill. If parents were really aware as to what was in this book, this room would be packed with parents, and they would be beyond furious. The subject matter that Jamie presented, it's in there. And I really wanted a hard copy of the book. And I know that Jamie requested a hard copy of the book and that she was denied that because they said that they had to send all of the textbooks back. So if there is some way that Jamie can get a copy of that, I think that that would be very, very helpful. And then, so after this, I wanted to go out and check to see if in your library that you had some of these horrendous books that are in the Blue Valley School District and the Shawnee Mission School District. So I went out, but I can't access what is in your collection. And I have been at Blue Valley school board meetings where books have been challenged and all about the collection and no one's responsible and this, that, and the other. I'm telling you, these books are horrendous. So I would like to know, A Court of Mist and Fury. Let me go, I'm at the wrong place. Court of Mist and Fury. All Boys Aren't Blue. Empire of Storms. Flamer. Funhouse. Genderqueer, oh, that's a really good one. That's abhorrent. I mean, it's beyond abhorrent. And that is in both Shawnee Mission and Blue Valley. And I'm hopeful that it is not in yours. Let's talk about it. That's another really horrible one. Living Dead Girl, Carnival at Bray, and this book is gay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. We are the adults. And for some reason, it seems like that we can't stand up and say that these types of books and materials are absolutely not appropriate for minors. You could not read these books on radio or broadcast TV because the FCC would say that they are indecent and obscene. But yet, and the curriculum and in this health book, same thing. You could not have read it on a radio station or a broadcast TV. What is that saying about us? It is time that we are the adults and that we can stand up and we can say that we have community standards and that this is not going to stand. I'm working on this at the public libraries in Johnson County because these books are also available for young adults, which is 13 through 17, really? I keep telling people, adults, that does not get to be used by anyone until they're 18. And then it's very tenuous. So I appreciate that this book was pulled very quickly. I challenge you to make sure that the curriculum that is in these schools, in the Spring Hill schools, and in the libraries, that they adhere to community standards and that we are not putting pornography in the minds of our children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming in.
Charlotte, would you mind emailing the list of that to our board clerk?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you did.
I tried to write them down as fast as
Who should I
Rachel.
email it to?
Rachel.
Moving on to, thank you for coming in. Moving on to action items, the playground equipment and surface renovation. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, at at our last meeting, our facilities director, Kylie Delphia, had talked about a grant opportunity that become aware to basically look at replacing a portion of our elementary school, Spring Hill Elementary playground, including replacing the mulch area with a rubberized surface, and then also would be allowing for the not the equipment, but putting in a rubberized surface there at Prairie Creek, because Prairie Creek is one of the ones besides Spring Hill Elementary that does not have the rubberized surface. So here tonight, like I said, we've got some information that Mr. Delphia submitted that basically outlines this in terms of cost, and would like to have action on this here tonight. And Mr. Delphia, if you have anything you want to add in terms of cost, whatever, that would be great. Or if you have any questions, that would be, I do know that we have in the meantime, since the last meeting, Mrs. Endicott has been involved with getting input from staff, as well as her site council, to make sure that that they had some input on the selection in that, and working, and as well as working with the rep, as we asked last time also about the budget. There is money within the capital projects budget where this would be taken from, but we also feel that it is something that needs to be done, because again, in striving to try to make our schools be as equitable as possible, Spring Hill Elementary definitely by far has the most aged playground equipment. So Kylie, if you want to say anything about, like I said, the cost, it says in there in that first paragraph, if you look under it's basically the total cost for the new playground sets, and that with the 100% grant, the company would cover, half of that. So the total cost for that portion would be, the cost that's listed there. And then down there, we basically are still working on some costs for the rubberized surface. So Kylie, if you want to answer any questions or say anything more.
Yeah, I don't have really anything to add there. You will see that our expense is a little bit more than what Game Time is covering. That's due to the shipping cost, and there's a kit that comes with each playground that has some touch-up paint and some other things that's included in that $77,915 as well. So other than that, I'll stand for any questions.
I don't have any questions. Just say thanks for going out and finding that grant. And those two sets look like a lot of fun. I haven't seen anything like them.
No, they are. Yeah, they're different than anything we have. But some of the play pieces are similar to what we have at the other schools to keep things equitable, but it is a totally different looking playground set.
And we get it for a good price here.
Yes.
To have the matching grant, cuts our costs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Significantly. Yep.
Good. Any other questions for Mr. Dell?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the playground equipment and surface renovation.
Second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the playground equipment and service renovation at Spring Hill Elementary School. Any final questions or comments?
I assume this coming out of capital outlay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do want to, again, just for clarity purposes, make sure, again, we're approving the playground equipment. And like I said, the actual rubber surface piece will have to be brought back with the actual pricing on that for the rubberized surface there at Spring Hill Elementary and up at Prairie Creek. This is only for the playground equipment piece through the grant at Spring Hill Elementary.
And additionally, we'll be potentially bringing back installation of this too as well, as that's not included in this price, so.
Any other questions or discussion, comments? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
approved.
Very
Thank you.
good. Moving on to the class action lawsuit against social media companies. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, last meeting, Greg Goheen shared some information about the firm that was the one that negotiated the settlement last year with the Jewel settlement, is now looking at targeting some of the larger social media companies. And they're trying to get some school districts to across the country to sign on. We shared that information last month and just wanted to know again if there is some interest. And if so, you can go ahead and approve to be a part of that so that whenever the time comes, you are included in that. And then if Mr. Goheen has any, I don't think he has too much additional information, but if you've thought about it since that time, I know we also shared out some information. If you had some additional questions, he is here to answer any of those. But again, if you want to approve that, just need a motion to do that. Or like I said, we can bring it back another time as well. Greg?
Yeah, and last time I was here, we had some materials to present to the board. We shared those with the board clerk. I believe she shared that out with all the board members. Main reason I'm here today is if you have questions based on those materials or questions based on the litigation that I can try to either answer, or if I don't have the answers, I can get those from the class action attorneys and talk to them and bring those back to the board. If not, as Dr. Luttrell has indicated, you certainly are in a position, if you wanted to move forward with it, you can make a motion to join it. And I would notify the attorneys of that, and there would be a contract that you would enter into with that group of attorneys. But it's up to the board. I just presenting information, and if you have questions, here to answer those questions.
Another question. What is the goal of this class action lawsuit? Is it to get algorithms changed, or is it for a pittance of money like the tobacco?
I think legitimately it is to try to get some of the algorithms changed and some of the targeting of minors, specifically minors who are in positions where they're susceptible to some of the things that social media does that are unhealthy, such as the body shaming, the bullying, the harassment, those types of things, to try to get the social media companies to be more accountable for that and to not target our youth that we have to spend a lot of time and money dealing with at the school district level. If you're looking to recover money for the school district, it's not going to happen. I want to be clear about that. I mean, you might get some small amount, but that's not what this is designed to be for.
So it's actually for a real purpose and not just money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the attorneys pursuing it would like to get some money out of it, and they would from attorney's fees standpoint. But the real goal here is essentially to try to get the social media companies to the table to stop doing some of the activities that were reflected in the materials that we provided to you guys. That's the goal.
Great.
It appears that it's just our way of helping send that message that we're paying attention to social media, that we have concerns with it.
That is correct.
We're not going to make any money from it. That's not,
I would not anticipate that you make any significant.
that's not the point, right?
But it does send a message, and the more districts they have signed on to the litigation, the stronger that messaging becomes. And so you can kind of see why they're trying to gather up a large number of districts to do this, to voice that concern of the problem. And if you looked at the materials, some of what was going on and is going on in terms of how they use the algorithms is very similar to how they targeted children when the tobacco companies and other companies like that were going after minors to try to draw them in with advertising and to pretty severe health effects. And I think you see a lot of those negative health effects from some of the social media stuff that's out there.
I thought the presentation that was attached to the email that had a lot of great information in it too. It'd be good to have that in board docs as well, since it was part of what you referenced. So
yeah.
If Rachel, if we could add that presentation was really good, just what was sent out to us.
Was there any determination of how much staff time it would take to
So unless you guys are designated as one of the lead districts, which I do not anticipate that you would be, I think they're going to try to look for larger school districts to be the lead on this. I think the amount of staff time would be pretty minimal, fairly similar to what we had to do with the Jewel litigation, where we might have to gather up some statistical information, or if we have some legitimate costs that we are having to incur to deal with that type of stuff. That might be something we'd have to do at some point. That would probably be at the tail end of the litigation if it happens. But I don't anticipate that you would be designated as a lead district in this litigation.
Thanks.
Would you be involved with it, Greg, or just?
Only from a monitoring standpoint. As I think I told you guys last time, there are several districts that I represent that are joining it. A lot more that are just considering it right now. I'm not really trying to push it one way or the other. I'm just trying to make sure that the districts that I represent have information about it so that they feel strongly about it. They can join in and participate in it. The districts that have joined for the purposes that Nels is talking about in terms of wanting to be sure that they're part of the messaging out, that this is something we're doing to support our students and to send a message that we don't want this stuff happening within the boundaries of our district to the students that attend here. Whether that's ultimately effective or not, I don't know, but I think that the best way it is if you ended up with some sort of consent judgment entered into on a class basis where they might actually make some change. That's not going to happen on an individualized basis. If we had some poor student who felt that they were victimized and they decided to sue one of these tech giants that have these social media companies, they're not getting anywhere. If the school district tried to do that on your own, you're not getting anywhere. But as a group of districts, if it's large enough and if it's more than just the Midwest, I think there's a shot. Okay, so great.
In your experience with this kind of litigation or seeing it, so I know like with the Jewel, well, they have to stop certain marketing things. I mean, what kind of follow through could you actually do to make sure that there's?
It's a great question, and I'm not enough of a tech person to really understand it. But I think what would end up happening is there would probably be an if you got to that point. And I'm surmising more than anything else. But if you could identify certain things that they are doing, the algorithms, for example, some of the other stuff, and it would get them to agree to not continue to do that. My assumption would be there would be a monitoring aspect to that, and if that is found to be as part of that policing or monitoring activity, there would probably be fines or penalties associated with that, would be my guess, but I don't know how they would actually police it. The real problem you got with any of this stuff is, like anybody else, these companies are kind of on the honor code a little bit. Nobody has the time to actually sit there and really review what they're doing on a daily, ongoing basis.
Yeah.
I personally think if we really want to make an impact, it's not going to be this lawsuit. Other than this would be helpful, or maybe someday down the future something might happen. But if we're truly concerned about it, it needs to happen in this district. Personally, not sure what the answer to that is, but
Yeah, I could kind of go either way on this. I could support it if everybody's, wants to join in, but I'm a little skeptical of what would actually be the end result. And if we're taking our staff's time to put something forward that really isn't very, doesn't have any teeth to it, I think it might be kind of a waste of time too. So I could support it if everybody else wants to too.
I hear that too. And Nels, I hear what you're saying. I don't know that it's mutually exclusive, though. I think that we can look at things to do as a district, but then also I wouldn't want to publicly be out there looking like we weren't supporting this. So I think it's a good message to send publicly. I don't know that much can come out of it other than it's just us saying we recognize the dangers of social media and we support anything, whether it be on a smaller level or a grand level, that would help with that.
I agree. I don't think we have anything to lose. But being involved, by participating,
but not participating.
by participating, sends that message.
Nicole?
I honestly, did not sit on the board when we did the Jewel lawsuit, but I was in the audience and I thought it was kind of crazy. Like there was no way that the school districts in the country would be able to fight some big time company. But they did, and they won, and there was change made. And so,
potential some staff time and a little bit of cost, but the staff time and cost, I think, would be fairly negligible overall.
Okay.
The fees that the firm would represent you on, that's contingent, so you're not paying them any money to do this. You'd probably spend a little bit of my time just monitoring what's going on, but it would be insignificant.
Any other questions? This is an action item where we can defer.
Mr. President, I motion to move forward with joining the class action lawsuit against major social media companies as presented.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to join the possible class action lawsuit against social media's companies. Any questions or comments? Discussion? Rachel, please collect the vote.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius, yes. Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to our discussion items this evening. The first up is special services purchase. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, we have a representative from our special programs department here this evening. Mrs. Charles was unable to be in attendance, but they're requesting a purchase of some curriculum materials that would serve a portion of our student population that has some rather diverse needs. In term one would be for the students that we have in our elementary BEST program, as well as the elementary RISE program. And they've used this some in the past, but they would like to add to it with some different modules. And so to give you kind of an overview of that here, we have a representative, Miss Bobby, and she's going to give you a brief overview. And then if you have questions, you're free to do so. We do not need action tonight. And we would hopefully, like I said, come back at the next meeting and get formal action through consent or through action. So Miss Bobby.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Bobby Darnaby. I'm the special education instructional coach for the district. The first item is Teachdown software that we currently use in our two site-based programs. As Dr. Luttrell stated, that's our RISE program, which is our students with autism. Our BEST program is our students with intellectual disabilities. We currently use the social skills within that, and we're wanting to do an additional piece to the Teachdown, which would add the curriculum for ELA, math, science, and social studies. And then the second item for approval is an app to put on an iPad for students with cognitive disabilities and also motor disabilities, so that they're able to use a switch to access the general education curriculum. It's their a switch is like their form of communication if you haven't seen them. And it would allow us to be able to put questions on there that they're doing in the class so that they can answer yes or no, or identify pieces of the general education curriculum. So our job at special education is to make sure that our students with disabilities are able to access the general education curriculum, and both of these would allow them to do that.
Any questions? And these are all web-based, right? Isn't that what I read?
They are, yes. One of them is an app, is from Help Kids Learn, that is for the switch that they currently use. We currently use it. This app that we wanted to expand on and allow the literacy, numeracy, and some science, so that they could, again, have some access to that general education curriculum. What they currently use is allowing them to learn to use the switch. When they come into kindergarten, they don't have a way to communicate. Most are nonverbal, so it's their form of communication, and this engaged and taught them how to utilize that switch. And now they're ready for the next step. We've pushed them to reach some more of their goals, their individual goals, and it'll allow us to put literacy, numeracy, and science within that.
Okay.
But yes, and then their parents will sign an AUP. They will sign specifically that they know that their child is using this. We send out a letter to every single parent with the website so they can get on and take a look at what it is. So for instance, the Teach Town social skills, that got sent to the parents as we utilize it. This is our second year in August. They get that and then they sign.
So parents are given an opportunity to review.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, special education, it's a home and school partnership. So we want them to be able to also utilize it at home and know that that those skills are being taught. For instance, one of the skills is, how to ask a friend to play. Maybe they're nonverbal, maybe they're not, but those skills are what we call in special education, that hidden curriculum. And so we are teaching them. So then if parents know that, maybe if they're at the park or they're somewhere where their student is in that situation, they can also promote that as well. So it's a great partnership to have, that they know what we're teaching so they can also utilize it at home.
What age groups is this for?
Elementary.
Elementary, okay.
Yes, just in our elementary age that are using these specific programs. Our RISE program, just with special education, we always try all the interventions that we already have. And this curriculum was for Teach Town, was specifically developed for students with autism and students with intellectual disabilities. And so the rigor meets their needs. For instance, like part of the lesson plan will allow, if a student has an AAC device, they're nonverbal, and how to include them in the lesson using their AAC device. It's really great because with this addition, we'll also be able to, they'll have professional development for teachers to go on. And as things, it's education, so everything is changing, things are improving and coming out, but it'll give them techniques as well, because it's that ABA that we're using with them, where they kind of like do a task, and then reward. Students with autism need that in order to stay up with their lessons. And so this promotes that. Instead of a normal lesson where the direct teaching is maybe 20 minutes, they can't engage in that. That's just above where they are. So we meet them where they're at and push them as far as we can.
That's very informational. I don't know what an AAC advice is.
Oh, yeah. So it's an
Device.
iPad. So it's an iPad. So if you're nonverbal, for instance, I can use this. He's my nephew. He's nonverbal, and so he's got a device with all kinds of words, so that when his granny asks him what he wants for lunch, he can just turn to it, and it has nuggets. Okay. And he pushes nuggets, and she says how many, and he goes to another page and hits 6.
Okay, great.
So it's great. Yeah. We have just diverse needs within our special education population. And I'm very proud of this district for doing everything they can to meet their needs and push them as far as they can go. So we need this assistive technologies and these different curriculums to meet those needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions?
No, I can tell how passionate you are about this, and I appreciate that. I think it's great.
Thank you. I love my job.
I know. You can tell. That's awesome.
Thank you. We
Good.
appreciate that. We'll bring this back as an action item on the next agenda. All right, moving on to open enrollment draft policy guidelines and recommendations.
As you've been hearing for quite some time, we have to hopefully have an approved open enrollment policy that is approved by January of 2024. We've been talking about it in the past. We're going to be talking about it tonight. We're going to be talking about it November 13th, and we're probably going to also talk about it and hopefully get some action at our December meeting. If we need to bring it in next week for our work session and get you some more updates, we can do that as well. But here this evening, to give you some more information and tidbits about that. And I think he's got some hot off the press information today that came out that might have thrown a wrench into some things. So anyway, Dr. Robinson is going to talk to us a little bit about our enrollment, open enrollment set to be going to affect school year 24-25, and we have to have our policy in place by January.
Yeah, I was glad to see Mr. Goheen walk in tonight, because KSB about 4:00 this afternoon released a revised update to policy JBCC. And I think you'll see that over the next couple weeks be a pretty frequent thing, in part as boards start to ask more questions about the policy and KSB gets more feedback. I think you may see some slight changes. So I'll share as we go through the policy piece tonight, the changes that they've made, and we will likely want to make those changes as well, because I think it'll make our policy clearer moving forward. So tonight, my intention is a couple things. Really, it's to take a look at the new policy JBCC. You have the complete policy in board docs. I'm going to hit the high points tonight and the big sections of it in hopes that as you go back and look at it further between now and November, if you have additional questions, we'll continue to try to answer those. As Dr. Luttrell mentioned, we're not going to ask for any action until December. So we'll have tonight, I'll hit mostly on the policy side of things. November 13th, we'll come back and look mostly at the actual capacity numbers. You should have a first draft of that this week to start looking at. I'll speak a little bit to it at the end tonight. But so tonight will be policy based. November 13th will be capacity based. We'll actually have to hold a hearing to receive some public comment on those numbers. And then we'll ask for you to take action on all of it in December. There are a couple other pieces changing that I included as attachments, but won't talk to tonight. If you want me to speak to them at any point more, policy JBC is our current policy. It's being revised to take out anything related to non-resident students. So you'll have JBC, which will just govern students who live within the Spring Hill boundary. And then you'll have JBCC, the new policy coming into place. So if you pull up that policy, really what you'll see is about half of it is deleted because they're separating the two as far as our policy is concerned moving forward. So you have that to look at. The other piece I provided is what we believe will be the updated in-district transfer process. And again, we don't have to take action on that by December, but it is something when you see the timeline piece, we'll want to take action on at some point because it'll roll out much earlier in this process than it did previously. So the other piece I included was just a copy of the House bill in case you've got questions as to what's actually in statute. Because the fun part of this policy is about 75% of it is straight from statute. So there's the last section is really the section we have some say in what it looks like. The rest of it is coming straight out of the statute and putting it into a policy form. So I didn't put all the definitions on here, but what you'll see when you go through the policy is the first piece of it is a series of definitions. Again, all of those are straight out of statute. Things like what's a homeless, a student experiencing homelessness. You know, it's not our policy. It's not our definition that we're making up. It's straight out of statute. So there he goes. The capacity piece I'll speak to more at the end. In the policy, though, you'll notice a couple things. One, it differentiates between kindergarten through 8th grade and what 9th through 12, what we can consider. Kindergarten through 8th grade is really just student to teacher ratios. 9th through 12th grade, it's a little bit more into programming. Although I would tell you, even at the middle school level, it'll be difficult for us to completely ignore programming as a limiting factor. And we'll get into more of that. The other thing it allows us to do in determining capacity is to use anticipated growth, which is a really big deal for Spring Hill schools. And then the other piece is we can use the maximum space we have. So I'll show you at the end, the two big numbers that we'll be working with will be what's our capacity based on staffing and what's our capacity based on space. And those look different at the different levels. This is the piece that is changing slightly. So I won't read through these. What I will tell you is they give us a list of, in statute, of groups of students that we can make a priority. They have separated that list in the revised version, which makes more sense. They have pulled out students experiencing homelessness, students in the custody of Department for Children and Family Services, and children of employees, that it doesn't matter what our capacity is, we can choose to place those, partly because some of those are driven by federal law. Like students experiencing homelessness, we really don't have a choice. There's other legal pieces that kick in. It would still allow us to prioritize military students and students who are siblings to students already within the system as we go into the lottery piece. So this piece will likely change because I think the new version that they released this afternoon will be clear for us just taking action moving forward. There are several things I wanted to highlight because they've come up as questions from board members as we've talked about this before. There are two things really noted that we can't do. One of those is we can't assess a fee to non-resident students that's different from what we would assess everybody else. So our normal fees for enrollment, if a student's coming from us from out of district, we can assess those. What we can't do is turn around and assess a out of district fee or non-resident fee that's just more to deter students from enrolling. So we need to keep our fee structure the same. The other piece is a non-discrimination piece. The biggest conversation around this has been students receiving special education services, 504, students that English is not their primary language, and then any student covered under our non-discrimination policy. There are ways we can manage our risk with this in how we do our lottery system. And it'll be really important that the information we collect is really limited to what do we really need to make placement decisions. And some of the pieces, like is a student on an IEP, we'll collect in the enrollment packet once the lottery is done. So there's some pieces that aren't necessarily in the policy, but that we can do to avoid discrimination or reduce our risk of a discrimination claim. Transportation is not required in statute or in our policy. The one exception to that may be students on an IEP. It hasn't been real clear, the guidance from KSDE, and so we'll see where that goes over the next couple of years. But in general, a student choosing to come here would have to provide their own transportation. The other piece, just to continue to note, is CASHA has not wavered on their eligibility requirement. So a non-resident student coming to us through the lottery system wouldn't be guaranteed that they could play. They would still have to sit out for a period of time before they would be eligible to participate, just like they are now, unless it's a bona fide move into our school district. So I would assume some of their other exceptions that are already in place will stay. But I just want to be clear that a non-resident student coming to us in the lottery may still have to sit out for a period of time before they can participate. This is the piece that we have a little bit of control over. When we worked with our administrative team on this, the only section we made a change from KSB's original recommendation was to up the expectation for attendance. And understand you're talking excused absences, that really what we're saying, this is the piece that if we accept a student, this is the expectation that we want them to maintain to continue enrollment within our district. We also try to be careful that we could apply the same or similar student in good standing criteria to our in-district process and other places where we refer to students in good standing. The rest of these are part of KSB's recommendation, and I would anticipate that you will see them in most of the other school districts. So when we talk lottery piece, one of the big pieces to remember is it's a confidential lottery. So when we get to the point of saying we have open seats, part of what's spelled out in our policy is not the process we would use, but just we don't get to decide who comes on our own. We don't get to look at their application and say we like this one over this one. We will have to work up a lottery system to draw. There is some pieces still being discussed, like if we select a middle school student because we have space at middle school and they have siblings, it's likely that even though we say we might be at capacity at other levels, their siblings would still get in. So there's some quirky things with the lottery piece that will come, but just know the part that's in our policy is that the selection for students to fill those open seats is a confidential lottery. I see some puzzled looks. Are there questions that I can answer? I know I'm not being real clear on that piece. No, if not, I'll keep going. If you've got
Well,
questions,
just could
please
you
stop me.
define the confidential lottery a little bit more clearly?
Yeah, so we are still working up what our procedure will look like. Most likely what will happen, and I'll speak to it a little bit from the timeline piece. So from June 1st to June 30th, I'll back up. The board has to establish before that what our capacity is for each building and each grade level. Then we have to look at how many open seats do we anticipate having for next year. So let's say we anticipate having 10 elementary seats open. We would then June 1st to June 30th accept applications for non-resident students to fill those 10 places. At the end of June 30th, we'd close the application period and we would go through a lottery process, taking the applications that we have and randomly selecting individuals to fill those 10 spaces. Does that make sense? Yep.
And once they have those spaces, are they kept forever until they graduate, or are they a 1-year thing?
Once we accept them, they stay until they graduate. So
What about in district? Meaning, I know you can come from out of, like, you could live in Overland Park. I mean, I know we have people in Overland Park. Further, maybe you live in DeSoto and you want to go to Spring Hill, but what if you wanted your kids to transfer to Shees, or
yeah, so it's not governed by this policy, but one of the things you'll see is a revised in-district process, because currently our in-district transfer process happens after enrollment, which has worked for us, but won't work in this case because you would need to determine in-district transfers before we determine how many open seats we have. So the in-district process will likely happen more in April and May, with then the board having a clear understanding of who's moving. One of the conversations we've had, and it would be one that we would welcome feedback from the board, is currently we have written the in-district transfer process similar to what we currently have in place. It actually makes it more restrictive on students in district than it does out of district. And that's a piece that our admin team has discussed multiple times. And part of it may be something that we want to see how things work in year one and make some revisions moving forward. But I think part of what you're getting at is I struggle a little bit with, if I've got students who want to go to Shees, for example, and I have space at Shees, telling them no, and then accepting out of district. There is some balance there of maintaining equity and maintaining some stability in educational programming and things like that. But I think it's something that as we have further discussions from the board, the in-district piece, we don't have to make a decision by December, but it would be something we would welcome some feedback on, because it may very well be that we want to make some additional revisions to it. But yeah.
So my
clear as mud in my response.
The other two questions that I had written down so far, and I
Okay,
still have more.
go ahead.
Keisha they haven't directly responded to this. It's just what the current guideline is, right?
They've been pretty
clarified.
When
I would lean to the height. I was looking at Mark to make sure. My understanding is they have made a determination that they're intending to stick with their current policy.
Okay.
And they have put that out in multiple ways. So I don't expect them to change it unless something changes legislatively to push them to do it. Now, just my own opinion, they're going to have some challenges with it. And it'll be curious to see over the next couple of years, do they make some changes? But at least what they have put out publicly and in over the last year, they don't intend to change their policy.
I just didn't know that they had said directly, we are not changing it, we're sticking with it. I knew that we kind of were going on what they've been doing, but I didn't know.
No, as far as I know, they've been really clear recently on it.
And then the only other thing, I know it's not a part of the statute, not a part of the state driven, but non-Kansas residents. I mean, we do have people that come this direction, come to Kansas for work, or they go to Missouri for work. But so that would be a board decision. The state, I know, has that open. Like, for example, the Western Kansas people they can have people coming in from Colorado or back and forth, but here we're recommending that we
So
don't
I'll
have
do
that.
some more digging because I'm surprised that they would put that piece in if it wasn't connected to statute in some way. And I don't know, Mr. Goheen, I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have any insight into that piece?
And he maybe was just.
And if not, we
I did
can get
ask
something
Adam
we can get
Thomas, yeah.
clarification on
I had
before.
asked Adam about it because I know he helped write this.
Yeah.
And he said that because of the Western Kansas, that's why
Yeah.
they left it open.
Yeah, I think as far as the out of state, I mean, I don't think the statute is designed to require the acceptance of the out of state districts like it is to require the acceptance of out of district in-state residents. That doesn't mean on the bordering districts, we're likely to have some kids from Missouri, I think as you indicated, who maybe their parents work in Spring Hill. And so by virtue of that, they're allowed to enroll their kids in Spring Hill as non-resident students. Or you might have some kids who are homeless, for example, but they would not fall in the definition of non-resident. They would technically fall in the definition of resident students, even though they're homeless. There's some other aspects to that. But I think that, as you're crafting the policy, I think that this really is designed toward looking at, as I understand the statute, at least it's designed to looking at residents of the state of Kansas that are trying to transfer between different districts as opposed to out of state transfers.
I don't think it would be a large percentage, but I mean, every child matters, but yes.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah. Other questions?
That's all.
It's just more of a point of clarification or
Yep.
asking. So these dates that you have in the timelines, that's going to be an every year deal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and really the in-district pieces are really the only pieces that we have penciled in and started to make some decisions about. The rest of those dates, I believe, are outlined in statute. So I don't know how many of you were around our offices between July 1st and July 15th last year. Holding the lottery, notifying families and all will be, we'll change some vacation time, I think, for a number of staff members. So it's it's a really tight timeline. I think the other piece, I think for the board to start to think about really from spring break until August 1st, somebody or a group of people are going to be managing transfers. And so it's going to be somewhat time consuming, at least, especially as we get it started. I think once you can get processes in place, it'll smooth itself out a little bit, but it will be time consuming.
This is one more question. It might be kind of a little bit in the weeds for where you are in the process, but we have a fair amount of people that just kind of show up, that just moved here, that maybe in September, October, do they allow you a little grace to save some spots for those new people coming in?
Yeah, and I'll jump into the capacity piece because
You don't have to cover it now. I just-
no, you're jumping into some things that are good questions. There are some places where we can save some positions, and I think we should. Because I think the other piece to keep in mind is even if we have a student who chooses to enter a lottery for another district and starts there and is unhappy, technically, if they live in our system, they can come back at any point too. So there's some things that way, because they would still have access to enroll within their own school district. So there's a lot of complexities to this policy that make it a little bit more difficult than just putting numbers down on paper. So I will send you this week a draft of our capacity numbers, and I would tell you, we've had a number of people look at them and give input on them. We'll accept lots more input. So if you look at it and something doesn't make sense, great, send us the question. What I probably would ask as you have questions is to send them to Rachel Henderson. And what I will try to do then is get information to Dr. Luttrell to push out so that it goes to the whole board. And that way, if one person asks a question, we'll send it out potentially with this Friday update, if he lets me tag in on that. That way everybody gets the answers at the same time and can kind of see what's being discussed. But I wanted to give you an overview of how we came to our calculations. So that when you look at it, maybe it makes a little bit more sense to you, maybe not. But I mentioned earlier, there's really two capacity numbers that we're working with. One is more of an architectural number. And if you think about when DLR has done work in drawing up plans for the buildings, there was a number assigned to each space. It's also similar to what RSP is using for their calculations. Keep in mind that number, if we go over it, means we need more space. The staffing piece, which is really what we're going to work with for this policy initially, is if we exceed that number, we'd have to add more staff. And I want to clarify that because there's a couple places where when you see the numbers, and I'll mention two of them. One, based on how we're staffed at Spring Hill Elementary, if we max out every classroom, we could actually exceed the 528 number that was put on that building space-wise. And part of that is the design of your lunchroom and your playgrounds and things like that. The high school is going to be the opposite, at least initially, that if I remember right, their number is like 1450 or 1460 for the building itself. Based on how we're staffed right now, we're below that. And part of why you would look at staffing is we want to make sure if we're spending taxpayer money to add staff, that it's the board's decision because of growth within the Spring Hill School District and not because we opened up our boundaries too far, if that makes sense. So part of this is looking at staffing versus the room in the building. So when you look at the calculations that you'll get this week, they're going to be based on our current staffing. Each time we add positions, our capacity number will change. So if we add a third grade classroom at one of the elementary schools, the capacity for that building goes up. So I talked to Phil for a while about this the other day. Once the board makes decisions about capacity, we'll start to build some tools behind the scenes that we can use so that we can give you a better prediction of if we add a classroom or if we add an ELA teacher or whatever the case may be, how it impacts our capacity number moving forward. The other piece I would tell you for the board to understand is we will set a capacity number in November based on policy. We'll have to come back and review it again. I believe it's April or May. And part of that is so we can look at what our staffing projections are going to be for next year and make changes before we open. So the board will have another opportunity, whether you like it or not, some of you, to get to review this again. So I just want to make sure you understand that there is two different numbers being used, and I'll try to explain what we're using so far. On the elementary side, we're using a student teacher ratio of 1 to 22. That is the same ratio that DLR put in place. It's also the same ratio that RSP uses for part of their calculation. So part of our intention was for the board or the public who's following those things, that the number would stay pretty similar. We did reduce that number by 1 student per section when we did the calculations. And part of that is what Sharon was asking about earlier. And that is we're saving space for those students in the prioritized categories that we discussed earlier. It will also give us a little bit of freedom should we have a student who just moves in before the first day of school. So when you look at it, you'll see the numbers adjusted that way. The other thing I would note is whichever number was smaller is the number that we'll use. So I'll go back to Spring Hill Elementary, for example. We've done the calculation and you'll see it laid out based on 22 students in each classroom, but I'm using the 528 number that the architect said is the capacity for that building as our capacity number. So you'll see, I'll try to highlight those things for the board and the public in that document when you look at it. Then we're adjusting the enrollment for growth. So this should be really easy if we could just do it by building, because RSP has already done a lot of this work for us. The problem is we have to do it by grade level. So what we did was look at the percent of growth between now and 27, 28. And we've applied that to each grade level as well, so that we could start to calculate for second grade at Spring Hill Elementary. This is what we're projecting our enrollment number to come out as. So yeah, so it's going to get fun, and this is part of why I wanted to talk through it before I just sent you the numbers. And I anticipate there will be lots of questions once you get to look at it. Middle school, very similar. The only difference here is instead of going by classroom teacher, we went by sections of English language arts. And part of that is because every student at the middle school level is required to take an ELA class. I would tell you the other pieces that we're looking at right now are the other limiting factors, because really at the middle school level, it's not English language arts that's our limiting piece. It's our electives. Because if you think about it, our plan would be to increase the number of electives as our growth comes. So right now, when I've got one band teacher or one choir teacher, I have a limited number of students I can put in a middle school. And so we'll try to show how all of that impacts us. The other piece you'll see in the calculation is we are also referencing the high school capacity at the middle school level. And part of this goes back to one of the questions that was asked earlier about if we accept a student, they stay until graduation. So to protect the district, to some extent, we have to keep an eye on what our high school capacity is until the board makes decisions about what to do with that piece down the road. So right now, with one high school, we have a capacity piece that we've got to manage starting at the middle school level. So we are accounting for that in our number as well. And then the high school number, we're also using English language arts for consistency sake and the number of sections that are there. What you'll see over the next couple weeks from us, now that KSB put out a revision, we'll go back again and look at JBCC and see if we need to make a revision to it. We've been working with our administrators to look at limiting factors for each building. And part of that, you heard earlier about the RISE program. There are capacity pieces to that program that we need to take into account as far as saving space at Spring Hill Elementary in case we need to place a student there. So some of those pieces don't necessarily end up in our numbers, but need to be things that we're considering. So you'll see some of that for each building as well. We have a couple of groups that will take a look at that. Cindy Jados and I are talking about the right people and personnel to take a look at limiting factors related to our special populations group, not just special ed, but ELL programming, and how we're accounting for students under McKinney-Vento and a number of other things. We are also intending to share some of this information at the district site council, which comes up, I believe, November 7th, 1st. Okay. I knew it was in November, so it's coming up. So we'll have a couple of other groups that will take a look at it. We will also need to post 2 weeks in advance and hold a hearing at the next board meeting for public comment. And so there'll be a lot going on over the next 3 weeks related to this. You'll see a lot more information coming back and forth from us, but I would encourage you as you look at pieces of it, if you have questions, please let us know as soon as possible. So, because it may very well be something that we have to seek out guidance from KSE or KSB or Mr. Goheen or somebody else before we can give you a response. Other questions before you move on to another topic for the night?
How does the money flow with students from out of district?
So this is the interesting thing right now. You would still have a 1-year lag currently before you would see additional funds. So once you enroll them and you get into that second year, you would start to collect money the same as they would treat them as any residential student. But in year one, until current year funding goes into place, there would be a year delay.
I thought I understood the only money that came was state money and general fund money and not any of the other money that we.
I'd have to look. I'll dig deeper into that piece.
Which is, I don't know how much of our budget is general fund, but
half, is it?
Well, the base aid per pupil is 5,088, but it should be going up a year from now. But yeah, my understanding, we just have to wait a year unless they get that fixed this year.
I don't want to speak out of turn, so I'll dig a little deeper and send clarification to everybody.
I have a couple questions. On your anticipated timeline, where in here is our traditional enrollment for our students? And are you guys going to be able to gauge it so that you'll see what current enrollment really is so that you'll know what space we have?
No, so well, I say that. We have, using definitions, we have kind of a pre-registration, pre-enrollment process that happens in the spring, but the actual student enrollment process can't open until July 1st because of things like your free and reduced lunch applications and some of the other pieces that have a July 1st statutory date. So there'll be, some of it we'll know. Some of it will be used in projected numbers based on current enrollment at that time and assuming that students are moving up. The other piece we won't have any knowledge of is how many of our students will apply in other lotteries in other districts and get accepted. We won't know any of that until we get into July either.
Okay. I wondered if that we could, yeah. Oops, I'm sorry. The other thing, our current out of district students that we've kind of left on that, where do they fall into this?
We were discussing that beforehand. I think our intention right now is to grandfather them in. If you look at the procedures, and that's still one of the questions I think being discussed by KSDE, but everything that we can see at this point says we should be able to grandfather them in. If you get into year 2, we wouldn't be able to displace them. So, unless the board gives me different direction, our intention would be to treat them as if that policy is in place and that if they're already enrolled in our system, that they would stay enrolled for next year.
Okay. I think that's all for now. Thank you.
A lot to consider.
Yes, and every time we discuss it, there's something new that we haven't thought of. So really, if you have questions, please send them to Rachel and it'll give us an opportunity to make sure we've looked at whatever piece, and we'll push information out to the whole board to make sure everybody has answers to those questions.
I'm glad it's based on staff and not on capacity. You could open a new school and have it filled.
Well, your middle schools are a great example right now, because obviously we built middle schools with space to grow into them, but we haven't staffed them all the way to that limit. So if you went just on space within the building, you could accept a lot of out of district students, but it would also then cause us, before the money comes in, to turn around and add a lot of teachers that we may not be able to find that quickly. So
I'm hoping you can find a gray area in that adjustment for growth to find a few extra seats.
Well, I will send you this week. I would like to think I would have it to Rachel tomorrow, but it may be Wednesday before she gets it. But by the middle end of this week, you'll have a first draft. And you can kind of see what we've tried to do with it to project out growth. And if there's different direction from the board, we can rework those numbers. But so please take a look at it as it comes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Moving on to our next discussion item, which is transitioning to weighted grades and Lot A recognition at Spring Hill High School. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, for one of the first things that whenever I first started in the position, even before July of 22, one thing that I heard was an area that could really be looked at was transition to weighted grades at the high school. When I went on my 100-day listen and learn tour, that was another theme that was constant. We really need to give more consideration to weighted grades. And so over the past year, and even prior to that, there'd been some work ongoing and it kind of got reignited. And you can see them lined up here. They're here tonight to just kind of, again, under the leadership, like I said, of, Dr. Smith, as well as Mrs. Zuck, have led the staff. The high school, Mr. Williams, a bunch of our staff and parents and students have all given input. And they're going to share tonight the fact that as to why it's being recommended to move and transition and when to do that transition into weighted grades at Spring Hill High School, along with the pros of being able to do that. So I'm going to turn over to them and let them give you the highlights with that. Again, thank you all very much for your work in advance, and we're excited to hear this.
Thank you. We do have a very large team assembled this evening, but this team has been working over several weeks and for some over several years on this potential transition to weighted grades and the Latin honors recognition system. And so just here with us tonight with Ms. Zook and I are Mr. Williams, our high school principal, Carla DeCoster, who is a math teacher at the high school, Katie George, who is one of our high school counselors. We have Giselle McDonald, who teaches AP Chem, and she's also the high school instructional coach. Alex Winkler is one of our high school social studies teachers. And then we also have a student representative, Kaylee Howell. She serves on the Superintendent Advisory Council. And we have two parents with us this evening who participated in our stakeholder conversations. We have Andy Beckman and Jody Schmuel. And I'll let the team share a little bit about the work that we've been doing and some of the recommendations that we're making.
Okay, thank you. I just want to go through a little bit of what we had talked about before. Just a reminder on what our goals were for doing this process is to research weighted grades in the Latin honor system and what that implementation would look like here in Spring Hill. And then also just we want to make sure we're being responsive to input from the students and staff members and the families that had, like Dr. Luttrell mentioned, had been reaching out and really asking us to take a look at this and move forward with it. So we just want to make sure that we're being responsive and then doing our research. And just, again, what weighted grades are and why they can benefit our students is these are letter grades that have a numerical advantage. So they're higher numerically than your on grade level and standard courses. And these are the highest level courses that we would offer. They're the most rigorous learning standards, and they require the most work out of the students and the most time commitment. So we want to honor the students for the work and the commitment that they have.
Thank you, guys. Alex Winkler, like I mentioned, social studies teacher, AP US history teacher. I want to talk a little bit on the why we are moving in this direction, why we'd like to move in this direction, just from a staff and a student standpoint. We want to encourage our students to take rigorous courses. We want them to be rewarded for their effort, rewarded for the extra time that gets put in. But at the same time, we understand that there is some fear that goes into this in regards to lowering their GPA, that GPA kind of as a either a reputation or something to hang their hat on. And there could be some fear there on maybe that GPA being lowered, even though they're taking a harder class. And so this is where we could talk all day long, but it's much better to hear a student's perspective on this. So I'm going to step aside for a second and let Kaylee come in and talk to you guys from a student perspective on why students are for this and why they really enjoy this idea.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Howell. I'm a sophomore at the high school. This year I'm taking honors English. I was also offered the opportunity to take AP Euro, but that wasn't even on my radar at all because as a sophomore, I didn't want to ruin my 4.0 GPA when I still have sophomore year and then junior year and senior year to take those harder classes. So if we were to implement weighted grades, it would allow me to put that back on my radar where I can be taking an honors class and an AP class, because to me, in my opinion, when I'm applying to colleges, I feel like they look more at my GPA versus the level of courses that I took. I genuinely enjoy taking the challenging courses because I feel more excited to learn new things. But again, I care a lot about that number, that GPA number. So if we were to implement weighted grades, it allows me to have that sort of padded GPA where I don't feel as stressed or, again, like Mr. Winkler said, fearful to take those classes because I have that something to fall back on, whereas that number still sort of reflects more of the challenging level of courses that we took. Again, it would just be set up where we can still maintain a high GPA, but again, allow our students to challenge themselves. And I know I'm not the only student that feels this way. I've talked to kids below me, kids above me that really think that, oh, I would have taken this class if I would have known I would have had something to fall back on. Because again, we're excited to learn. We want to be in these harder classes, but I just feel like if we implement this, then we have that something to fall back on.
Thanks, Kaylee. Appreciate that. when we have our students applying for college, I taught senior government as well. So I deal with juniors and seniors, and they talk about college applications. And as they fill out these applications, not only are they putting their GPA down, but colleges are also looking at the challenging courses that they've taken. And so, like Kaylee said, this is giving an opportunity for students to take these challenging courses, at times earn a higher grade point average, and then gain that valuable experience that is going to allow them to be successful in their post-secondary life. In addition to look a whole lot better on a college application, college resume, when they see these AP courses, these honors courses stacked up on their application with a high GPA as well. Scholarships matter. We want students, college is expensive. We want students to be able to gain as much scholarship money as possible. And that weighted GPA is going to help them in scholarship applications. And in addition, ACT scores is something that, we want to continue to trend upwards in our district. And ACT scores on college applications, especially for you guys to put kids through college, that's money. ACT scores are money. That's scholarship money. That's less money that has to be taken out in loans that come out of parents' checkbooks. And so that also is a great opportunity for our students to take those advanced courses. We can see the benefits pay off in our ACT scores. And then ultimately that's more money in the pockets of our students often post-secondary education. And that's a big deal. We also want students in our district to be competitive with other districts in our area. This is something that, and we've got listed on this PowerPoint here, all the neighboring districts that already have this. And it's not something that's just big schools. School districts smaller than ours already have this implemented. And we want our students to be competitive with other students and other school districts in our area. And again, if we go back to college admissions, college scholarships, we want to give every student in Spring Hill the opportunity to apply for those scholarships and to make themselves look as best as they possibly can. And as we continue to add more AP courses, add more honors courses, and implement a weighted GPA system, our students' resumes and applications will only look better to these members that decide on who gets scholarship money, who doesn't get scholarship money. And we don't want to put our students at an unfair advantage compared to other students in this area. We want to do what's best for kids. We want to do what's best for kids post-secondary life to get those world-class results. And this is something that we really feel could help them move in that direction. Like I mentioned, there's a list of districts with weighted grades. Again, it's not just bigger school districts. You can go south to Osawatomie and they have weighted grades. You can go north to Tonganoxie, they have weighted grades. We're looking at Baldwin and Osawatomie are 3A school districts. They have weighted GPAs. In addition to your 6A schools, obviously your Blue Valleys, your Olathes, your Gardners, your Shawnee Missions, everybody in the area has weighted grades. And so this is going to give our students a chance to compete on that same playing field and bring our district up to the same level that these are in terms of weighted grades, especially as we continue to add more honors and AP courses into our course load at the high school. And then what courses are going to get weighted? This is something that's been discussed. It's been talked about. It's not just any course that we feel like deserves a weight, gets a weight. This has been thought out. It's been researched. Our honors classes, our AP classes, and our dual credit classes are courses that are going to, have that weight added to them, and deservedly so. These classes are more rigorous. They are more time consuming. They ask more of students than a regular normal course load. And so because of the increased difficulty, the college level content, AP courses in particular, they're meant to reflect content, rigor, and timing and spacing of a college course. We want to reward our kids for doing that. These kids are involved in a myriad of other activities. We listed them at the beginning of the presentation. We've got band, athletics, all these different things. And yet these high school kids are choosing to take a more challenging course load. And by going to a weighted grade system, we're going to reward the kids for working hard. We want to teach them that hard work yields results. And this is a way that we can reward their hard work and reward their efforts and help them in their post-secondary life. Here are currently all the courses that we offer. I'm not going to read them all by name that will have weights added to them. But as you can see, there are numerous courses already at the high school that's going to benefit a high number of students that we already have that we can add a weight to right away. And it's not like something that it's just, these 2 or 3 kids that take a couple of these classes. No, we have a long list of courses and courses that we have started adding in the last 3 to 5 years. And so as we continue to grow, as we continue to expand, we want to continue to offer these college level courses to our high school students. We have a lot already, and it's going to benefit our kids even more as they take them. They're not going to be as fearful to take them, like Kaylee mentioned. And then I'm going to turn the math side of things over, because I'm a social studies teacher, to people way more qualified than me.
Hi, I'm Carla DeCuster. I teach the college algebra and calculus courses at the high school. So right now you can see here, everything is weighted the same. So my college courses are weighted the same as the other courses. So they're all the 4.0, 3.0, the traditional setting. Our proposed change would be to weight the classes you just saw, where an A would give every student a 5, anyone who got an A would get a 5, and then go down from there. We still feel that if you got a F in an honors class, you still don't get any points for that. Just saying. And that was looking at, again, we looked at the list of districts, we looked at their information, and thought that this would be the best option for our district and the ease for understanding for all patrons looking at this weighted system. And then to figure out a student's GPA, they would add up how many points they earn based on their grades, and then divide by the total number of courses. Again, we were looking for ease for every student to be able to figure out their GPA, rather than some very interesting equations that people came up with. Okay, let's just say it that way. So why not show you some examples of how this would help our students? Because it should help any student that would take an honors AP or college course. So you will see here, this was taken from last year's student body senior class. So you see our sample student number 1, this would have been a valedictorian, had a 4.0 unweighted, and then with her weighted classes, she took 8 of them, had a 4.3. You look at student number 2, this would have been a salutatorian, got a 3.98, and with that unweighted, had a 4.31. So helped that student more. And same thing for student 3, the 3.82 with the classes that they took, 4.18. So you can see that no matter what the student's GPA is, if they take advantage of the system, it's going to help their GPA. Okay. And so we listed their possible enrollment in some honors classes, freshman through senior year. Are there any questions about the weighted system? Okay, cool.
Hello. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Katie George. I'm one of the 3 high school counselors, and also a mom in the district. I had class of 2023 graduate. So I graduated last year as a freshman at Iowa State. This year I have a junior and also in 8th grade. So very much just lived all of this last year with my graduate, very much living it right now with my junior taking these AP courses, also running a little cross country. So I'm going to talk to you about the Latin honor system, which is something that we would like to propose to go along with the weighted system. So with weighted grades often comes a transition from valedictorian, salutatorian recognition, where traditionally the top students, and in Spring Hill, it has been typically the 4.0 students who have completed the Kansas Scholars Curriculum. And then the second highest students, where again at Spring Hill have been typically those who have the 3.99999 and have completed the Kansas Scholars Curriculum. We would like to transition that to the Latin honors recognition system. I did a little research on that. The system dates back to the 1890s. Of course, it was initiated by Harvard, and it uses a predetermined standards and consistently applies them to candidates for graduation to recognize them for their academic achievement. And for those of you that don't speak Latin, excuse me. Summa cum laude means that would be with highest praise. Magna cum laude, that's my son. Magna cum laude means with great praise, and cum laude means with praise. That's still my son. Stop calling in the middle of this meeting. It's not that son. I'm sure he has something medical going on. Okay, and then moving on, the Latin honor system recognizes all students whose performance exceeds our already high academic standards It honors a broader spectrum of academic accomplishments rather than simply those that achieve a 4.0 or a 3.99. So as you can see, and those of you that have been at graduation, you know that we call to stage all of those that have achieved the 4.0, and then we call to the stage those that have achieved the 3.99 GPAs typically. The Latin honor system instead it is widely recognized by colleges, universities, trade schools, employers, and scholarship committees. It has become the industry standard. So speaking from a counselor point of view, that is very often what we are asked. We are asked about weighted GPAs. We are asked about the Latin honor system. Those are things that are very, very typical in my world. Okay, the Latin honor system gets rid of class rankings. We would no longer do that. That's always a very big struggle, like Kaylee talked about. It's a lot of pressure for a student. It causes a great amount of angst in our teenage students, and I can speak from that very personally. I just know the week before graduation, the angst from, am I going to get that A or that B in comp? Am I going to get that A or that B in calculus? Am I going to be number 1 or number 2, or am I going to fall off and be number 3 and not recognized? And that's very, very challenging and real heartbreaking. I can specifically remember sitting down with someone who thought they were going to be valedictorian and I still look in that chair and think of the tears that fell that day when we discussed and how that doesn't define them and all of those good counseling things. But definitely super duper hard and heartbreaking for this kiddo. So because of this, as Kaylee mentioned, they often decline to take educationally valuable courses and decide to take courses that will help them maintain that desired 4.0 GPA. Or more commonly, not take that AP or honors course that might ruin their GPA, or they even ask to drop the course mid-semester because they are falling to that B or that C. This keeps them from challenging themselves and taking the course for the learning that they gain in the course, which obviously is what we want students to be taking courses for, not for the A, but for what they're going to learn. With the Latin honors system, there is no longer the pressure to be number 1 or be number 1.9999 by playing a GPA game. Okay, and then finally, the Latin honor system is based on consistent standards. Students are not compared to other students to determine diploma recognitions. Any student who achieves a predetermined standard will be recognized. Students can take the challenging courses, benefit from the great knowledge they will gain as real life skills like grit and perseverance. They can potentially earn that very scary B, but now combined with a weighted grading system, they can still be honored at graduation for challenging themselves and achieving the true purpose of education, of course, gaining skills and knowledge. Turn it over to Mrs. McDonald. She does a little more math than I do.
Good evening. So our team was pretty unanimously all on board with the weighted grade proposal and the Latin system proposal. What became a little bit more challenging is what are going to be those cut scores to recognize the cum laude, the magna cum laude, and the summa cum laude. So we had the fun pleasure, personally, along with a couple of us, to hand calculate previous year's graduates, what would have been their weighted grades. And so what you see here is kind of a sample of 14 students that we took. We particularly focused our calculations on the top 30% of our class last year, because those are the students that most likely took the weighted classes that we currently offer. These are a random sample of 14 students, and you can see what their class percentage was last year, what their unweighted GPA was, and what their weighted GPA would have been, keeping in mind that I hand calculated these weighted GPAs, so hopefully I am very close to the 100th, okay? But you can definitely see how all of those weighted GPAs would have the weighted GPAs was an increase from their unweighted GPAs. So what became challenging is where should we establish those cut scores? As we looked at other school districts, we noticed that every school district had different cut scores for the 3 levels of praise. And that makes sense because every school district has different levels of course offerings that are weighted, right? So we had to establish cut scores that make sense for our school district and where we are at currently. So our team's proposal is that these are the cut scores for the 3 different levels of Latin praise. But we feel very strongly that as this is our proposal, we have to keep in mind that we're going to need to revisit this in the next year in the next 3 years, and even in the next 5 years for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have short-term and long-term goals to continue to add to that to that list of classes that are weighted, the list that Alex Winkler showed you. We want to continue to add more honors courses, more AP courses, more dual credit courses. So as those courses are being offered, the ceiling of your weighted GPA is only going to increase. So we're going to have to revisit those cut scores so that we can adequately reflect the percentage of kids that we want to honor during those graduation ceremonies. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the next reason why we're going to have to revisit that is because while I was able to, we were able to calculate these GPAs off of last year's graduation class, they were registering for those weighted courses based on an unweighted system. So if we now propose a weighted system, we anticipate that kids will enroll differently, just like Kaylee mentioned. So we definitely need to, this is our proposal currently, but we definitely want to stress that we really do need to revisit this. And we feel like it's probably going to take us about 5 years to get to a point where we feel like our cut scores are well established and reflective of who we want to honor.
Good evening. So I get to talk about graduation. So you've all had the opportunity to sit through Spring Hill High School graduations. We have our salutatorians come up, they get a plaque, they sit back down. Our valedictorians stand up, receive a plaque, then they all stand up on stage and they get to take turns giving speeches. So moving forward, if this was adopted, how we'd like to go for it, we would recognize all 3 levels within the program of the graduation ceremony. There'll be cords, colored identified cord for each level that the students will be issued to them to wear during the graduation ceremony. The magna cum laude and the cum laude will stand and be recognized, and we will have the summa cum laude students come up on stage, and we'll give them either a plaque or a medallion, whatever we choose to go with at that time. We will continue to have the senior class president give the welcome and the Pledge of Allegiance for us at the beginning of the ceremony. But instead of having all the summa cum laude students have the opportunity to speak, we're going to open up to the entire senior class that if they want to speak, they can submit a speech to a committee. The committee will screen the speeches and we will decide on one senior speaker representing the class for graduation moving forward.
We would just like to introduce Mr. Beckham to come on up and just share a little bit about the parent perspective of this proposal.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. As I mentioned, parent perspective here. I had a daughter that graduated from Spring Hill High School last year. I have a junior son also on the cross country team who better be in bed already as well. And then I also have an 8th grade son at Woodland Spring Middle School. So I feel like I have a unique perspective on that. And then I also want to share that I also, 3 of my college buddies are all in administration all across the state of Kansas. And I've asked for their feedback as well. They've all implemented weighted grades and they've given me some additional details. So if you're not already convinced by everything that's already been shared tonight, I'd just like to give my perspective. Everybody here never would have taken the opportunity to be on the Board of Education without a realization that it's a challenge and you got an opportunity to do something great, right? Today, my fear and my concern is that the way the system is today, kids are choosing not to challenge themselves, right? They're like, well, I could keep a 4.0, or I could challenge myself and put myself out there and pull myself down in grades, scholarship opportunities, college admissions. And I grew up in a small town in north central Kansas. I had 14 people in my graduating class. I was top half, so I feel really good about that. But the thing that really got me concerned about these weighted grades is a few years back, there was another guy that was on the cross country team that I got to know, super smart guy. He was a national merit award finalist, not a Spring Hill national award merit finalist, but he was a salutatorian. That day I sat there in graduation. In my memory, I swear there was like 30 valedictorians, and we had one of the smartest guys ever to come through Spring Hill High School who was a salutatorian. And that just like made me scratch my head, like, what in the world's going on here? So started to dig into it, started asking a lot of questions. But in my opinion, the weighted grades just make total sense. One, it removes a lot of that risk that the kids have, much like that's been already discussed. It makes them more competitive. I have a lot of high expectations. If you guys all come to the cross country meets, you probably heard me yell. Katie's probably told stories, but I have high expectations for my kids. And unfortunately, a lot of the teachers and coaches that also impact my kids. And I have that same high expectation for the school district that we're in. We got an awesome thing going here. But I feel like we need to, turn up the fire here a little bit and allow our kids to succeed. Part of my unique perspective from my college roommates that are all in administration. One of them gave me this and I was really surprised because he's not really the brightest one of the bunch, but luckily his wife is. And she's the doctor up in the St. Joe district in Missouri, but she actually said there was a study in Texas when they implemented weighted grades, they had a 9% increase in students that went to go be a part of these AP courses. So Spring Hill, roughly 1,000 kids, if I'm correct on the population. I mean, that's 100 extra kids that are actually challenging themselves. Roughly. So I'm not the math major either. But so anyway, the real world also doesn't reward the easy route. This is everybody's been through challenges here. Everybody's still alive. Everybody's had the bumps, the bruises, the scars. They've come out better for it, right? So my perspective, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and I'll turn it over.
Thank you, everybody. I want to talk a little bit about implementation. If we were to move forward with this, what that would look like. So our proposal from the team is that we would begin this in the 24-25 school year for all students that would be currently enrolled, but we also would like to retroactively award weighted grades for any student that is still enrolled. So going back to their freshman year. So if there is a senior that is still enrolled at the high school, we would go back and give them that weighting for the courses. It says up here pending Skyward's capabilities and costs, but Phil says it's a go. He won't do it, but he said it can be done. We also have completed the program planning guide for the 24-25 school year. And so we have denoted the courses in there. You'll see it is attached to board docs. This is the what we're going to use to denote the weighted courses. So the ones that we listed for you on that slide all will have this symbol next to them. So students will know which ones are weighted. This is how it would look. For example, this is your Honors English 2 course, which we offer, but now you can see it is, you can see that there are 3 designations there. So students will know that that's a weighted course. And also they are listed in the description at the front of the program planning guide, explaining what weighted grades are and how they are implemented and which courses they would apply to. And we would obviously update this yearly as anything is added. So our next steps, I just want to go through and show you kind of, this is the process that we've gone through. We did show this earlier in the summer when we presented, but we have gone all the way through all of those steps. We've had several, we've had a couple site council meetings, we've met with students, we've gotten feedback, and we are now bringing this to you with the hopes that there would be a November 13th approval of this. We'd like to get going on it so that we can have everything ready to go that we would need to starting in January, because that is actually when course selection process begins for next school year. And then again, we would hope to implement this and the Latin honor system with that 24-25 school year. Anybody wants to add? Okay. Any questions for any of us?
And I think maybe I can have this question before when it's brought up, but my only concern is for those people that are kind of in the middle, like that this has started with them. So if this starts with the kids, the 2024-2025 school year, but all the kids, and you would retroactively, so there could still be people that when they fill out that college scholarship form, they're going to say, yes, we have weighted grades, but they maybe didn't take some of those courses because it wasn't. Right. You understand what I'm saying? That's kind of my only concern.
There may be some people who didn't take weighted courses because like didn't take those AP or honors because they weren't weighted, but I don't know that that would ever not be the case. Like anytime we start. Or
Right, right. So that's really been my only concern from the get-go is I think, and maybe that's been some of the hesitancy in the past, it's just when are you gonna pull off the Band-Aid and do it, you know? Cause it's gonna maybe put just a few people, but you know, it's a big deal if you're those people.
And
So
no
I'm-
one's GPA can go down.
Right.
So it
Right.
only increase the GPAs to what it would be. So.
But do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I always felt like when my kids were applying for stuff and they checked that thing, no, we don't have weighted grades. Well, then they didn't expect that to be above 4.0 because it couldn't be.
Mhm.
But if there is that little checkbox, and they only took a couple classes and they really don't even have a 4.0, they maybe could be at a disadvantage. So I'm not saying you have to change it or anything. It's just a concern kind of the process from the get-go, but it's maybe.
Kristen, could you clarify one thing though? Because one of the discussions that was had at the meeting was that in most cases, when students are applying for scholarships or applications that universities, I'm looking at Katie because she probably knows more than anybody, are asking for both their weighted grade and non-weighted. That may be helpful.
And there's typically a place where they can explain if there were any changes in the grading system. So I don't know, Katie, do you?
Yes, I would say.
You want to speak to that?
Yes.
Yes, almost always. In fact, I was working on a Common App today and it does ask for both weighted and unweighted if you say that they are weighted. So they are both out there. There's also all kinds of places on applications and things like that you can explain anything different. You would submit your school profile, which really explains kind of the nature of our district, which I think helps our students quite a bit. And I actually just did a little PD on school profiles and how to amp ours up to be more beneficial for our students to explain kind of where we're at. And you can also explain any sort of nuances in a lot of different places. Like you could say, I took AP courses and self-studied on my own, or, you know, I was a freshman during COVID and this is what happened. Or my school district just started weighted. And this is how I changed my course. So there's some narrative part of it. And especially those more elite schools. So you can always explain that. And you could also ask your recommenders to include that as well.
So that may be just a communication piece.
Yeah, for sure.
Between staff and students to.
Absolutely.
To explain that a little bit.
So there would no longer be valedictorians, correct? And also no more class ranking? I know that was asked on, I think, every application that my kids filled out. What is your class ranking? So
if we move to the Latin honor system, we would not provide a valedictorian or salutatorian, but if a student needed to know their class rank for the purpose of their admissions or a scholarship opportunity, we can still rank students in the background. So we would still be able to provide them with that information for their application materials.
I just wanted to add real fast, like to your question, when you were asking like about kids being upset because they didn't take a certain class, like I didn't take AP Euro because it wasn't going to be weighted, but I would rather have my grades changed for that honors class that I did take, even though I had that opportunity to take the AP. I feel like everyone was saying, it still has opportunity to only like benefit us. I don't really think that it hurts anyone, if that's what.
Hi. Are there any classes that we've offered that we currently don't that would be weighted? So as we go back in retro, are there classes that we used to offer that we don't that would then be weighted?
I don't think so.
And okay, so I'm really excited about the weighted grades. I think it's an awesome way to keep pushing kids and challenging them and rewarding them for doing well in those classes. I also want to make a comment because I don't think I've shared this. I did speak with someone from K-State that said they are now prioritizing schools and students with weighted grades over scholarship applicants of unweighted grades.
I have a freshman at K-State and I haven't seen any of that.
So I'll get the information from them, but they are prioritizing those kids, and they thought that since they're doing it, they would assume other colleges are prioritizing those kids as well. I will say though that I'm a little hesitant with the Latin honor system. Because I do think that I want it to be, I think I've said this, a very prestigious award to be given. And so if we looked on your sample data, there would have been 4 students that essentially would have gotten the valedictorian. And within the new Latin honor system, we would be recognizing 12. And 6 of them would be at the highest level compared to the 4. I'm excited for kids to continue to strive and get there. And I think that when I sat in the meeting, you guys had used the example that they were only working, like competing against themselves. But I like that, but it is very not, I think I said this, Sarah, it's not realistic in life at all. Like you're never hardly ever competing against yourself or anything. We're not competing against ourselves in any of the state qualified things. We're not competing against it. That's not a competition. That's not the nature of a competition. So I want to make sure that we're setting those thresholds to be where we are recognizing similar numbers, similar percentages of kids. I still want kids to, if everyone's getting in there, no one's going to try for it because it's just not a big thing anymore. So I still want it to be a very, and I know that you recognize that we have to reevaluate that. I think that I would caution in doing that because as we continue to move that goal line for those kids they thought their goal was going to be this, and now that year we moved it here, they're going to have those same thoughts and concerns that maybe kids in the middle of this now are having, like, wait, how is this going to affect me? So that would be my only concern.
I would think if it changed though, it would only change going forward, not for students that have already been in the other system. I would think.
Yeah, that's a great thought. That's a great thought. I don't know.
Well, and part of why we do need to reevaluate, just to give you kind of an idea, is when we looked at our neighboring districts that have this, their summa cum laude, some of them is at 4.7. Our students don't even have the ability to get to 4.7. So, because we just don't offer that many courses yet. And so our numbers have to reflect what we currently have so that our kids know. That's the only reason why we need to reevaluate. We anticipate after about 5 years, we would be in a place where that's just what the set would be. We would kind of know this is where we want to be. And that's about how long it took the others to get to where it's the same year after year and they recognize about the same percentage of students year after year. But for us coming in new and there's so much growth and changing, and we're not really even sure how many courses students will want to sign up for now. We just want to be really clear about that we know we need to reevaluate.
I would just say that. I would just say that I feel like as educators, we have seen the game of school played over and over and over again. And so while I know that in real life, oftentimes you are competing against your peers, we really do want to move away from that. We want our students to make the choices for their post-secondary success and the goals that they have in front of them. We don't want them to make choices because they just want to be number one. We want them to make the best choice for themselves. And if that's to take all the AP math courses that they have available or all the honors and weighted courses in math because their post-secondary goal is in math and science, and so be it. So I think that's really actually what we're trying to move away from is that game of I want to be number one, or, does that make sense? So I do understand what you're saying, but we're hoping that enrollment is reflective of their goals. Yeah.
Can I piggyback on that competing against yourself idea? Competing against you, and I've coached 3 different sports at the high school level as well. Competing against yourself is a mindset that will help you compete against other people. You can't control when you go into a job interview how the other 5 people interviewed. That's out of your control. What you can control is how well you prepped for that, how well you competed against your own self, your preparation, your knowledge. what you bring going into the table. We can't control the 1,000 other kids that apply to this college, but you can control what you can control. And so to piggyback on that idea, the whole idea that we're competing against ourselves goes, we're competing against each individual student in their own learning, in their own career, in their own pathway, because at the end of the day, those are the real world skills that will carry them on past high school and past college. We want our students, like in our vision statement and in our mission statement, to be a world impact. We can't control what the other 8 billion people do, but you can control what you do. If that means taking the AP course that you need to take, you take the AP course that you need to take. If that means bolstering your own GPA, you focus on your GPA. You don't worry about the other 300 kids in your class. And so that mentality of competing against yourself, being the best version of yourself, I think is the goal here, like Giselle said, because we want students to be able to control what they can control. And going to this is really going to allow for that personal style of education. We want learning to be individualized for every student to be able to find a successful pathway for them to take on. It's one reason why we've expanded our course offerings. It's one reason why we continue to expand our CTE offerings. We want to give every student the best opportunity that they can for post-secondary life. And many of our kids, and we're talked about weighted GPAs, many of our kids aren't going to go to a traditional four-year college either. Yet the skills that they learn in these AP class and these honors courses, it will look better on a job application when they have to write these things down, but also the skills that they learn on how to be the best version of themselves, how to think, how to read, how to write, how to have advanced problem solving capabilities, all in the scope of, I'm not worried about what my classmates are ranking. I'm worried what I can do, how I can better set up my future. That's the goal here. That's what we want to do. We teach that in the classroom. We teach that on the athletic field. We teach that in any sort of extracurricular activity that we do. That's the goal here. That's what we're trying to implement. What's best for each individual student and letting them carve their own path on what they can control.
I just also, in our conversations, I think that the whole competing against ourselves will help our students at Spring Hill be more competitive when they move to the next step. I think that by them agreeing to challenge themselves and take that AP course, and even though they may get that B or that C, they will be more competitive and they will be able to compete against their peers when they move on to that next step. And I think that's kind of the end game, because they're going to have that knowledge that they're going to gain from all of that AP scores, rather than the scary, I can't do it because I might get a B, or I'm too busy and I can't keep up with that rigor. And I also think that we want to make sure that our students are not playing the game by taking every single AP course and then burning themselves out. I think as counselors, we for sure will still counsel them to do exactly what's best for them, whether that's one AP course or one honors course, and not playing that GPA game of I'm going to take every single one, because we do have students that will retake that ACT over and over and over again because they want to be that number one student. And I don't know that we all feel that necessarily that's always the healthiest thing to do for our kiddos. So that's my counselor piece.
So there is definitely a lot of passion for weighted grades and the recognition system. In fact, I think the very first meeting that Mr. Williams and I had at the high school was, hi, I'm Mr. Williams, and let's talk about weighted grades. So it's something that I know the team has been working on for the last 2 years, even though it's just a discussion we've been having since the summer. So a lot of thought, research, and preparation has gone into this.
Just one final question. Is there any downside to it? I don't really see any downside to it.
I don't know that the team has really identified any particular downside. As we've said, GPAs can only increase. Students have, more opportunities to challenge themselves. They have the opportunity to look at the standard that's being set by the Latin honor system and decide for themselves, how do I want to push myself to meet that standard? So we really have no downsides to this proposal.
The only thing that potentially is the speaker. Also, some of the kids are really motivated to be the valedictorian and be the speaker. And now it would be, well, the president is kind of a popularity contest, and then anybody else can apply to speak.
But I would also say conversely, there are a lot of valedictorians that don't want to speak at all.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I think it's kind of a balancing act there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily be the president either. I think we were talking about a tryout essentially.
Yeah.
Just some different things. So maybe the best speaker.
Yeah,
would be-
I think different schools handle that different ways anyway, like who
We've
speaks
talked
at
about that.
graduation. Yeah, this is a question for Dr. Robinson. So how do you plan on determining the possible enrollments in these classes for open enrollment? Sorry, not to put you on the spot, but.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the pieces we've been discussing is as you do this, you will see some fluctuation in who's taking which courses, which may cause us some issues, not necessarily even in open enrollment, but just in staffing and all in the future.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's a welcome.
Yep.
I'm in full support of this. I would welcome the challenge to try to figure out how to make open enrollment work with this piece.
I think, sorry, just another idea I had while sitting in here, and I'm not the open enrollment expert, but I could also see if we're the only people in, I don't know, 3 counties that don't have weighted grades, a lot of your upper level kids might say, I'm going somewhere where that I can be supported. So.
Thank you guys for your, thank you all for doing all this work to put this together. It's a great idea. I'm all for it. Oh, by the way, the program and planning guide is fantastic. I think the last one I saw was on paper. So it's been a long time. There is an equity piece I was thinking about that nobody's mentioned on this, but concerning the rest of the state. So it's Terry, right? No, I'm sorry.
Andy.
Yeah.
Andy.
Andy, oh my gosh. Anyway, sorry. You're talking about your district you grew up in North Central Kansas. They don't have the access to the AP courses. So here our kids have, because we're in a more affluent area, we have a much greater advantage over the kids in these other districts. I'm not saying I don't want to do this, but I'm just saying there is an equity piece to this that no one's mentioned, considering we're all coming out of the same general fund with the state. So I'm surprised. There's something there for them to work out. But
I will say, college courses seem to be more prevalent in that area than AP courses. I wasn't familiar with AP courses as a parent, but I had, I don't know, 20 some hours going into my freshman year at K-State because of all the college courses we had.
Your local junior
But they weren't
college.
AP. Yep.
Yep.
So
Yes.
Colby Community College, Fort Hayes, Barton County, or not
Yep.
Fort Hayes, but Barton County
Right.
provided a great access for that.
Good.
So.
And I had one last question. I assume all teachers are using the standard A scale, 90, 80, 70, 60. Because I know in the past there were some that with 92, 82. So you would have to have the same scale. Okay, got it.
I failed to mention my biggest point of why.
Yeah.
You know, when I read the mission, the vision, and the strategic plan, and in case you haven't memorized it, I'm sure you all have. Mission is to be a school district that engages students to learn. That's the first sentence. In the vision, it's empowering each student to achieve world-class success. And if they're already going down the road more traveled than the less traveled, I don't know that that's true. And then the third, and this is the most important one to me, is the strategic plan. Spring Hill School District will make progress toward becoming one of 2 top districts in the state. And I think right now, I apologize if you guys take offense to this, but I feel like we're playing from behind right now. So I feel it's third quarter, fourth quarter here, and we're down by 3 touchdowns. So, and that's nothing a shot on anybody. It's just, you know, Osawatomie has weighted grades, Blue Valley has weighted grades, and Spring Hill doesn't. So just, once again, just data opinion here. So sorry if it wasn't well.
I would make the comment that it is not school board that was holding back the decision. So this is the first presentation that we've had for this.
Yep, first we've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our plan, like Ms. Zook shared, is to bring this as an action item to the November 13th board meeting so that we can go ahead and begin that course selection process with that program planning guide that's attached to board docs with our students at the high school in January.
Yeah, and to be fair, Nels, it hasn't been the school board, but I've also heard in 4 years, I've heard this on repeat from all of you. And I know how hard you've wanted this and worked towards this. And so I support that completely. So I want to recognize all the work that you've done in this too. So it wasn't you and it wasn't us.
Very, very good presentation.
Any final questions? Okay, very good. Thank you. Excellent work. Let's take a 10-minute break, 10-minute recess. We'll return here at 9:25.
Yep.
Thank you. Really, the driver behind this was something that came to our attention not long ago. And Dr. Luttrell, if you could give us an overview and we'll have further discussion.
Yes, this agenda item I felt was needed because of the fact that, again, not every school district all the time will, when it comes to policies such as instructional materials, selection and resources, we have them in place, but sometimes it actually needs to bring them out and make sure that everybody is on the same page and knowing what the expectations are, what needs to be followed. And usually, and this is the case for that, why that is needed sometimes is whenever the existing policy protocol may not have been followed. And this particular instance here, I made a big misstep back in July, and we did a purchase of a health text at the high school that, again, I did not bring it to you all for formal approval. And as was stated during public comment earlier, rightly so. It would not have mattered if this textbook had been $25,000 or $10. A textbook or any resource that is serving as the main resource for a course shall, according to the policy, needs to come to the Board of Education. That did not happen. That's on me. And at the same time, I also don't think, nor do I want individuals to think that my misstep is an indictment on the whole process, that is something that we have rampant throughout pre-K through 12 of having textbooks that are the main source for learning in a class that haven't been brought to, because that is not the case. Now, this misstep was made. Were there individuals that, again, have lost some trust in that process because it wasn't? I'm sure there have been, and it's on me. It's on the district as a whole to make sure that we work hard moving forward, to make sure that we follow the policy, make sure that I hold myself accountable for that. We talked about community standards earlier. Again, I know the board will probably smile and agree with me on this, is that when I came from the East last year, even though I'd been in education a long, long time, things in my initial mindset that I thought, well, we did these over East, we're going to do the same things here. But people have different ways of doing things, and you have to learn what that process is. And over the past year, while again, I have strived to learn and immerse myself into all things USD230, I'm still learning. Just as you all know, my Friday updates last year were short at times. Okay, but I've learned over time that it's more is better. And so now that's why you usually sometimes get 6-8 pages worth of an email, because I try to include as much as I can to think, okay, they're going to want to know this. Okay. And so again, the purpose of this discussion was just simply it was precipitated by my error. Do not want, again, that to happen again moving forward. But at the same time, we thought we'd review the policy. And so Dr. Smith is here, and she's going to, like I said, kind of walk you through and show you that as a whole, we do have processes in place. They are being adhered to, and she'll show you some examples of how we try to go about trying to be as transparent as we can. Again, in this case, it wasn't done, and that's on me. But Dr. Smith, if you would, and then we'll open it up to any questions that I can take from any of you.
Thank you. So there are two types of instructional resources that we would purchase or identify to support our district curriculum. We have core instructional resources, which are the primary resources that a teacher would use to provide instruction for a class, and core resources are often used on a daily basis, and they are a primary driver in the instruction of the course. And then we also identify supplemental instructional materials. Those are things that an educator may use to support teaching and learning. It may just be a particular unit of study. It may be on an intermittent basis that they would use those materials. but those are the two types of materials that we would identify to support our district curriculum, core and supplemental instructional materials. And then these are just a few of the types of materials that are identified to support curriculum in the Spring Hill School District. We have anything from textbooks, perhaps digital resources like you heard about earlier tonight from special services, web platforms, apps. We might have some teaching aids, things like globes or dictionaries. It could be equipment that we identify. Our math teachers really like whiteboard tables and whiteboards for math instruction. It could be lab supplies that are identified to support science instruction. It could be assessment materials. So our professional learning communities are often looking at data to help make instructional decisions. And so we identify different assessment materials to support the curriculum. And these are all different types of instructional materials that would be in use in our classrooms.
These are core.
These could be core or supplemental, depending on how often they're used. Traditionally, your textbooks, student workbooks, those things tend to be more core materials. Supplemental materials tend to be things like your lab supplies, math manipulatives, things that are, like I said, used intermittently or to support specific units of study.
I'm not sure I have the distinction clear between core instructional materials and supplemental materials.
Yeah, so it really is just about the amount of time that it's used in the classroom. So these are just terms that we use. So when we say core, it's just a material, maybe it's a textbook that's intended to be used every single day for instruction. It's going to really drive the learning in the classroom. And then supplemental just might be something that supports an individual lesson, a series of lessons. It tends to be more equipment based, or it might be an excerpt, an article, something that is being used to support one curricular objective.
And all of these kinds are subject to board approval, textbooks, instructional materials, and selection criteria, correct?
That is according to our policy, yes. And so our policy for textbooks, instructional materials, and media centers, that's policy IF. Textbooks and instructional materials are meant to provide an effective education for all students. They are meant to be factual, have literary appreciation, aesthetic values, ethical standards, practice for students to develop abilities in critical thinking, communication, math, and science skills. It is meant to include information which helps students develop an appreciation of American culture, ethnic and racial diversity, and balanced views concerning international, national, state, and local issues and problems, and then the sufficient flexibility for meeting special needs of individuals and groups. And the superintendent shall develop those selection procedures to meet the above criteria. And then that material is then reviewed by appropriate staff members. Those are items from our policy IF, and the full policy is located both attached on board docs to this presentation as well as in the policies section of our board docs website. So attached on board docs are just some procedures, processes that are in place for identifying different materials, whether they be core or supplemental. So core instructional materials have included formations of selection committees. So we bring teams of teachers together so that they can review the state standards, review our local curriculum, look at those educational objectives within the state standards and the local curriculum. They review that and then start evaluating different materials for instruction. So they'll do very thorough reviews of texts and different material that might be identified to support the curriculum, whether that's a website, an app, a textbook, a student workbook, a novel that's going to be used for class. And they do that based on a set of criteria. Generally, the criteria is either recommended by the Kansas Department of Education or that national organization for the content area. So for example, if you were reviewing science materials, the National Science Teaching Association has recommended rubrics that they encourage school districts to use when they're evaluating materials to make sure that they are in alignment with those standards and if they follow those best practices for instruction and for education. And both of the processes are on board docs for your review as well. When we go through that process of evaluating, we take those opportunities to usually trial a product. So when we narrow the scope of the different resources that we're reviewing, we'll evaluate them. We'll typically narrow that down to our top 2 choices. And then we'll do a short pilot and typically then do a second evaluation of those materials. Within the process, we try to make sure too that if there is a home connection component to the resources, if there is an opportunity for us to provide input from parents and families, we like to include that as well. And then our policies would say that we would then bring our findings, our research, and our evaluations and share that with the Board of Education.
This process does not mention the list of those.
I think it's under the stakeholder part.
I'm looking.
I said I didn't see the community members being listed, at least in this thing. It's in the policy, but not in your listing.
And we can certainly add that.
Yes.
And
you're talking about the core instructional materials, right?
Just
the how the process.
I'm talking about policy IF on the composition of the review committee shall include 2 community members and 1 student.
I believe the review committee is for challenges, but we could, okay.
We used to have a instructional or a textbook committee that included community members, but I guess that's no longer.
And we would certainly welcome community input. As we've done previous adoptions, we've shared these with site councils and received opportunities to get feedback from families. So we can add that as a formal part of the process. What we've also made available, and we started working on this over the summer, is updating what's on our website so that all families can see what instructional materials are being used for courses. So when you go to our district website and you look at our program planning guides for high school, middle school, or elementary school, you can select a particular course and you can expand that class and see not only the course description, but you can also see what the instructional resource for the class is. And so this was a little bit of a summer project for the teaching and learning department to start adding all of these materials to the website so that we could show what materials were being used in all of our different classes.
Can you help me understand when we're when there's new curriculum, and I think that I remember this earlier this spring, we pilot a program, and I think we did it for like the preschool one earlier this year. Regardless, that's implemented in our classrooms, piloted prior to it coming to us at all.
That is correct. It has been our practice to pilot for about 4 to 6 weeks to get a short unit of study to make sure that the material does what it says it intends to do. So for instance, do the teachers feel like there's usability? Do they feel like the students are engaged when they use that material? Are students responding and doing well on any of the quizzes or assessments if there's one administered? So is it making sure that the students are effectively learning the course objectives?
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. How does that fall within policy then if it's presented to the students for 4 to 6 weeks before it's approved?
So if it's the board's purview, we could certainly bring pilot materials for approval.
I know I'm talking over and I don't know if you guys can hear me, but that's what I think. I know it's a discussion item, but if we're going to move forward and you got and the curriculum's narrowed down to 2 selections and you're trying both, I think the board should see both selections prior to any pilots or anything being put out.
I agree. And I think that's actually the policy is pretty straightforward, that all will be reviewed ahead of time.
We can certainly write that into our procedures. Our teachers, I think, do a wonderful job of forming committees and reviewing materials, and they really, I think, do a nice job of considering their options. And so I think they would be more than happy to come with me and present any of the resources that we're considering for pilot or for adoption.
This is just speaking for me. I'm not a teacher, so we trust the teachers in what they're going to teach, but I think there are certain things, I mean, i.e. the health book, obviously there was a misstep, but if we're narrowing it down between 2, and a lot of this has to deal with the high school level, but if we're narrowing it down to 2, we should have first view of that before getting it in front of students or shareholders. And I think we need to put that in as a policy.
Yeah, I think that the policy reads that way currently, so I think it just needs to be upheld. Also, on this second one on the screen right now, challenges can be brought by any student or parent, legal guardian of a student currently enrolled in the district. I did email with Greg about this, trying to clarify that policy. So thank you for acknowledging that the Board of Education can also review. So it doesn't have to, you don't have to have a current student most of the people sitting up here don't have a current student. So Greg had confirmed that by policy, the board can look at a challenge as well. So I think that we need to add that to that slide.
Sure. So if we have a challenge to an instructional material or a library media center book, there is a process in place through Policy IF about how we would go about reviewing that material for reconsideration. And that policy is, again, like I said, it's attached to board docs, but it's also found in the policy section of board docs as well.
And I think there was some conversation. So just to read exactly what you wrote, so we're all on the same page. There's nothing in the policy that would prohibit a Board of Education member from reviewing a particular textbook. Thank you for that.
So in the spring semester, the courses that we're currently reviewing and considering new instructional materials for include AP Government for grade 12, Spanish for grades 6 through 12, and Computer Science for grades 6 through 12. So these will be instructional resource adoptions that we would bring in the spring. And certainly we would take the board's feedback on strengthening our processes, specifically regarding pilots or other avenues that we can pursue to make sure that everyone feels very comfortable with the processes for identifying and selecting texts.
I would like to make a comment because I mean, granted, the health textbook is the latest, but the country is, and especially the upper big education, is pushing a lot of things on students and pushing it down further and further, even into elementary schools. And our vision talks about small town values. To me, that means family values. And certain things just are inappropriate for students. Even, I mean, this textbook looks like it was written for college age students. We pushed it into high schools. Some people are putting, as it brought up earlier, these library books into elementary schools. And it's totally against our vision in my mind. So we need somebody in the district that shouldn't have to come to the school board to be protecting our small town family values. And with this, I don't see it.
I agree. I agree. And just to add to that, and maybe this is the time to make this comment, but I mean, even the NEA recently just had a post out celebrating banned book week. What's your favorite book? Like they're almost making fun of that, banned books, when we're just trying to protect small town values and that. So with library books, there's got to be a way that we can, I like how you have transparently worked on that in the summer. There's got to be a way that we can list all of the books somewhere that can be, so that all parents can see what books are available to all the students in the district. Is that a possibility?
I think it would be a possibility. We can find a way to maybe try to make that searchable for parents on our website. I do know that if you have a student in the school district right now, you can search the Destiny catalog for particular titles, but we can see if it's possible to put that on the district's external website as well.
You know, Nels, with your point, I think there's going to be a day when you can't find a text that you're going to be happy with.
Well, yeah,
I mean, it's just that hard to find them. I mean,
it is
there's not a lot of choices, is there?
Yeah, not. I mean, it's a shame. I agree.
And I agree with Nell's point. I think to this point, though, while we still can, we need to follow what we say we're going to do. That's just my opinion, and I know that's could be controversial, but I think at this point we need to, while we still can, we need to be able to uphold those values that we say we do.
What's that? I agree, but what does that look like? What I want to focus on is a tangible thing that we can write into a policy that says that. I mean, that's the struggle, right?
Age-appropriate material would probably be a good start.
There you go.
Well, I think just following the policy is a good start. So it's approved first before piloted or anything else.
Yeah, and I agree that, and I think it's about. I mean, I think there's been some good suggestions here on how to improve the policy, and I think that's really. I'm glad this discussion is happening because it's, you know, we're looking through a different lens now, but we have to focus that on the process and how do we improve the process to prevent things so that we're not in a reaction. I think having that policy, having everyone understand what the policy is, and then having everyone follow the policy and the board having an accountability to ensure that the policies are followed. I think those are all key tangible actions that we can take to prevent recurrence and improve the overall outcome in the future. I think that's the important piece of this, is to focus on the process and how we improve the process to prevent.
I agree. And I think that just clarifying what the policy is to make sure that everyone's on the same page. One of the policies that I think that we should talk about publicly too, and this seems the right moment, when the parent when we came to the district meeting at the time, the policy was stated that if it was something under $20,000 in purchase, it didn't have to be approved by the board. That's what I was told and parent was told. And then looking into, after calling our state board of education and the commissioner of education, that they said that did not relate to educational materials, that just was a financial policy.
Right.
So I think that just for clarification, because that was put out there, that was why it didn't come to us, because it didn't hit $20,000. That was the reason given. So just to clarify, that's not the case, that it does have to be approved.
That is correct in that aspect. And as I said, on this particular textbook, like I said, the money piece, whether it should have had no bearing, and I should have brought that to you. Yes. And then I want to also say that I think, again, this discussion is healthy. I think it's good that we have it. I think it also does, lend itself to the fact that when you really look at the policy as a whole on IF, it leaves a lot of ambiguity there. It's a lot of gray in that. And you got to remember, when we're talking instruction, we're talking a very, very, very wide swath. Okay. And the one thing that, every district is different on what their expectations are. And I do hope, and I do think that out of this, hopefully give us a little time, but maybe we can have some further discussions, with maybe a subcommittee. There's going to be some new board members that are going to, take the reins come January, and maybe we can fine tune or hone in on what might be some of the gray areas that we definitely want to make sure is defined more clearly, because again, one district may say, no, we only want to see the major source that's going to guide that instruction in that class. If, whatever that main resource is, that's what we want to see. Because the other thing is, we have very talented educators, and we want to give them some leeway on when they have interventions they need to give with students that are struggling. If they find a resource, maybe they want to, but also when you look at the policy at face value, then what does that mean? The resource that what they're using has to come to the board. Those are just, I think, general questions I think need to be ironed out. Some of those types of things get magnified when we do have a discussion like this, but it's still important that we hear people's input so that we can go back and say, okay, well, yeah, we don't want to spend every single moment, every meeting looking at every single instructional material, but that's why we have myself when I'm not messing it up. We also have, we have directors, we have talented principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches that we also entrust to make some of those many decisions, again, through the lens of knowing what our expectation is from the collective body. So again, I do and definitely apologize that I did not bring this text to you, but at the same time, I do think the discussion has been healthy to have further dialogue so that everyone, especially again, as new board members, kind of has an understanding, more of a peace of mind. Okay, I need to make sure we take this. No, this one here, no. But again, I think it's been a healthy discussion.
Do we plan to chat more about this to define what that looks like?
I think we need, definitely.
And I think that can be done. I mean, the answer to that is yes. I think some of those discussions might need to be occurred where maybe we need to, let's take some pause after tonight, and then maybe it might be of benefit that maybe over at some point, maybe the board just appoint one or two individuals that maybe could work with, Dr. Smith, myself, and a few others as we maybe try, because, it does state very clearly there down at the bottom that the superintendent shall develop selection procedures, which will include a review of available material and by appropriate staff members. And I know that since I've been here again, just most of those things are in place. Maybe it's time that we make sure that we've got definitely selection procedures. And in that document, we could define that it's kind of like we would have a handbook on this type of material. Definitely, you better bring that. This one here, we're going to trust the principal that they're going to know that was something that could be brought in. And then we could bring that. But then when maybe we draft that, and I'm talking big picture here, but maybe then after we get that selection criteria developed through the group of like Dr. Smith, we can then maybe bring that back like we would a handbook and say, okay, here's, we feel will align with policy IF, and that could kind of be our guide moving forward. And we could do some of the work behind the scenes rather than taking up a lot of time here. Because like I said, we even while this is very important work, and it definitely, there's a lot of other work we also have to try to devote time to at our meetings.
So my recommendation would be to follow our policy on developing and adopting policies, which is starts out with the superintendent, and whoever they determine is going to provide the best input to draft something so that we have edits, improvements for that particular policy. I think the next step is attorney involvement to see if there are any legal ramifications to that policy. If we're missing something, if there's a statute we're missing, so there's a legal review, and then a board review, so that board members have a time frame to provide feedback. And then I think also having our policy allows for public input on policy development and submitting proposed changes. And so I think that's a solid process. I think that's at least that would be my recommendation, is we work through that process on policy IF. There's a couple of other things associated with it. So policy IF, the policy IKI, I think there's something about lessons plans in there. I also think Dr. Smith, you had some ideas and thoughts on the supplemental instructional materials. That's why I asked the question, because I think there's a difference, and I think it addresses what you're mentioning, Dr. Luttrell, is that the separation of supplemental instructional materials and core instructional materials is kind of a key component. We had them mixed on a graphic here, I think, but I think within the policy or the guidance, having those separated is probably I would yield to your expertise on that. So anyway, supplemental instructional materials, core instructional materials. And then there's another guidance on instructional materials selection. And so I think having a review of those, identification of the specific improvements, not only from a content, but an efficiency perspective. You mentioned, Dr. Luttrell, we have to maintain an efficiency. We don't want it to take 8 months, 10 months, a year for the board to approve a textbook. When a lot of that work is done, I think adding the details like, providing pilot materials to the board prior to executing on the pilot. I think that Ally mentioned that Greg had given you some guidance or clarification around board members reviewing things, or for challenges from the Board of Education member. Temper that with that overall perspective of protecting small town values. And then you mentioned putting books on a website. I'm not sure I clearly followed that all the way, but it just seems like we have a policy in place to create, develop, and adapt policies, and we should follow that. And overall have an overall outcome of an improved process with clarity for the board and the community. That seem reasonable?
Yeah, in some ways, and I don't want to undermine kind of what happened with this health textbook, because I think as a parent, I probably would have been really ticked, and maybe as a student been really offended. But also I kind of want to caution a little bit from being too specific and too kind of myopic about what each of us individually defines as what we think should be taught, or what viewpoint, because I think there's discussions going on similar to this where maybe they're talking about totally different things all over the country. So we have a wide variety of people that are in our school district, and we need to remember that, you can take and I don't want to put this towards this book, because I think there were lots of things that were questionable, or at the very least, but you can really take offense to about anything. And there's been things that maybe our individual family that we don't adhere to certain things, but to not allow that in the school, I think it'd be kind of hard. So, you were talking about being more specific in the policy, but I think you also have to have some room too for lots of differing views and stuff. So, I think of these teachers in this group that was talking about these weighted grades, and I've experienced many of them teaching my kids, and I would trust them for whatever. I don't have this sense that our district is infiltrated with all this questionable stuff that people are trying to push on our kids. I really don't have that, but I do think we have a responsibility with the Board of Education to protect our kids, and to moving forward, make sure that we're doing our due diligence. But also, we can't personally read every textbook and Dr. Luttrell can't even personally read every textbook. So things also have to be practical. And we don't want to stand in the way of choosing the best curricular material and make that a year-long process when it could be a 3 or 4 month process, because we want to make sure that we look at every little thing. So we got to be able to have some trust and some people that are doing certain things along the way, so it doesn't all fall on the Board of Education. So that's probably more than what I want to say.
I hear, oh, I'm so sorry. No, I hear everyone say, I should say, I do agree. I have read 2 textbooks in the last few weeks, and it is not enjoyable. But I would also like to, I hear a lot about trust. We have to trust people. We have to trust people, our administrators and our teachers and all of that. And I think the piece that is missing in this, and I've said it before, is the accountability piece. And I don't think I understand what the accountability piece is. So we're trusting them, but when that trust is broken or things aren't followed, policies, where's our accountability? So I think that we all need to understand, and part of that conversation, maybe not in the policy, but definitely a conversation about where is the accountability? Because I think that's where you build trust, is knowing that when things break or fall apart, there's an accountability piece.
You have more presentation, or sorry?
No.
I didn't,
No,
I was
that's okay.
hoping that, I know that we kind of jumped in.
No, that was the last piece.
Okay. So I do have I do agree with everything that we've talked about. That policy needs to be, accountability absolutely needs to be there. Trust needs to be there. And Dr. Luttrell, I just need to say that I don't believe this all falls on your shoulders. So I just want to say that publicly too. I do have some follow-up questions to this specific situation. How many books were actually purchased? I've gotten a couple of different numbers.
I believe there were 60 books.
60 books. And so the intention was for them to stay in the classroom.
They were purchased as a class set. There are 2 teachers who teach the course. So each teacher had a class set of books, and they would just be used during instruction when the teacher felt like the content aligned with the curriculum.
Right. And so they would never have gone home, those books. I mean, there's not enough. There's a lot more than 60. And this was a freshman health class, so roughly 13, 14-year-olds. With that, I know that we're waiting on the return of the books to return the books. If that makes sense. However, one of my follow-up questions is, this book was in circulation and given to the students for 6 weeks in a day from the beginning of school until September 26th when it was pulled. So what are we doing to alert the freshman parents that are now finding out about this publicly? If they're wanting to review the book, if they want to see, I realize that we have a list that was given of what would have been planned to teach by the curriculum. However, the reason we know about this is that student had access to the book and she saw it, multiple students saw it themselves. So even if it wasn't something planned, it still was given to the students. And the parent that spoke just scratched the surface of many of the topics. So do we have a plan if the freshman parents would like to review this book before we send them back?
There has not been a mass communication to those freshman parents. And that, again, is on me. I am open. I am more than happy myself to write a communication and pen a communication to those parents and let them know that, again, what happened. I can also let them, can define for them in terms of what the frequency of the text use was, because it's my understanding that, again, even though one time is way too many, okay, because again, it didn't have approval to begin with, is that, again, that even though it was 6 weeks before the text was pulled, that in terms of the actual distribution of those texts each day only occurred one time for one day's lesson. It wasn't that every day they came to class, they had the copy of the text that they got out. But I have no problem penning myself communication to those parents of those students and giving them the specifics and encouraging them that if they want to review that text, they can, we can make a process for them to do that. If they want to call and ask questions, I'm more than happy to speak with them, over that. At some point though, I think we do want, which again, Doug over here is already nervous about if we're going to get that money back, you don't want to lose that. But no, we will need at some point. We do need at some point though. And I think we could probably maybe talk to the publisher and see if we could, because I would like to get as many of them sent back as we can, just so we, maybe we could say, look, if we send 50 of them back right now, and then, because like I said, we don't want to keep track, because as time goes on, eventually, the way those publishing companies are, they will start some point soon diminishing in the value. Not that that's meant, but like I said, but no, I'm more than happy to pen a communication to those parents of those students, telling them what happened and giving them some options to pursue if they would like.
I'd say I just caution on downplaying the access to the book, because the students saw the questionable things in the book, and that's why we're even talking about this, even if it was just one day. So another follow-up question that I had is just truly wanting to support the teachers. And so if we pulled this book, that's been 4 weeks ago now, I guess. So I don't think we've had any other curriculum brought to us or any other book brought to us. So what are they teaching from?
No, and I think that aspect of it there, whenever I pulled the book, the resource was told that what had been in place prior to the purchase of this text, which would have been last year, whatever module or resource they had been using that apparently had been in place for several years, they would revert back to using that. And that's what has been the case with that. And what was the second half of the question?
Well, and so, but with that last year, it was health class was a part of PE. So health class was one day a week, and now health class is 5 days a week by state requirements. Now that changed. So that's part of why we got the textbook. So I just want to be sure that we've provided or I'm wondering what resources we're giving to the teachers to be able to teach a 5-day class going from a 1-day class last year.
And so they do have, like I said, and Dr. Smith can give more insight as to the specific platform, but it is more of an online based. We've used it a lot for in our credit recovery program. But the other part of that, though, that I do want to emphasize is that the reason that there hasn't been immediately a new curriculum for health, a new curriculum resource because we have the curriculum in place, a new resource is because of the fact that, again, knowing, again, as this discussion has put, knowing, again, finding a resource that is going to have only the information that fits our curriculum from a publisher is very challenging. And so we've got some options there where, again, we can, rely on our talented staff which they have resources themselves, but to maybe go in an open source route, where we would kind of compile our own book. But there's things involved in that with copyright and different things that you have to put together. It just doesn't happen overnight and is going to take some time. And I know that Dr. Smith and her staff, along with, some of the health groups, have had that discussion to make that happen. But in the interim, they are using what was in place before. I think, to my knowledge, that is working. And again, you see the list there where it says content areas under review. Like I said, we're probably, while we figure out what is going to be the major, the text, do we just keep maybe revert to what we've been using, maybe just keep that going forward? Or if we find, okay, what resource might be one that we could go check out, that we could maybe then, like I said, maybe get some input, feedback from some individuals to say, hey, what do you think of this? And then maybe bring one forth that we could offer to you. But we just didn't want to bring real quick snap of the finger something back that we knew would probably have some content in it that, again, was going to be right away kind of, be somewhat, have some individuals taken aback. But if any of you know any particular, again, good publishers publications out there that address our curriculum standards that we have, by all means, feel free to share that with us and we'll definitely take a hard look at it.
I'll just follow up and say, I do appreciate this conversation. I do appreciate the opportunity to ask questions. I commend the students that were brave and came forward and parents that talked. I know that's not easy, so thank you for that. And I think I had one, Rachel, I would like to send you just my kind of recap notes email, if you could send it out to the board too, but, and that's available publicly, of course, my email is to everybody, but, I think actually you answered the last question I had just asked in the email today was how can we assure the parents of the district this will not happen again? But I think it's by following board policy and creating this process. So thank you.
I did just have one clarifying question, and that is like when you have a classroom set of books that don't go home with students. I mean, and maybe this is not a question, just a statement, but that's not to hide that information from the parents. It's because they only read assigned things in the class, or am I totally off on that?
No, that is correct. It certainly isn't to hide any material from families. It's just simply that they would only be using that during class for specific activities. So there isn't a planned assignment at home, homework that they would be doing. So a class set is more cost effective if they have no outside of coursework that's planned for the class.
Yeah.
That relies on the textbook.
I think the optics of it in this situation are hard, I think, but I,
well, but I also don't want to assume, make it sound like the assumption that that's what happened here, because there's lots of classroom sets of books that it's not so that the parents can't see them or that,
right.
So that's more just.
Well, and to their point, it's hard to find a publisher, it's hard to find books, all of that, but maybe that if there are things, well, there are definitely things in this book that I'm confident our community would not be in approval of. So maybe that book isn't completely available like it was to all the students and just pulling out the chapters that they need without having access to the entire book.
Dr. Smith, real quick, just like a 10,000-foot overview. How does it work when you decide you want to look at a new curriculum? Do you have salespeople come in with books? Do you guys go to a website and look at them? How does it work?
So we contact vendors to see if they happen to have instructional materials that fit what we're looking for. So do they have something that addresses that particular content area and would it align with our curricular standards? We also consult different websites like Ed Reports. So it's a little bit like a Consumer Reports, if you will. So they conduct independent studies of different text materials. And so we look to see if there are any existing reviews of the material prior to, so that we can kind of help narrow the search. We also often, if it's something really common, we'll talk to neighboring school districts too, who have recently conducted reviews of instructional materials for recommendations.
So how many, just to guess, how many vendors are there? Is there probably not a whole lot, is there? Or is there a lot?
There are a lot of vendors, but there tend to be vendors, I think, who are vendors you're going to use more regularly because they're just larger in the market. They're considered more reputable. They've been around longer. So we typically focus our efforts on vendors that we've used over time as an initial place to start, because we know that they're going to carry products and conduct efficacy studies with their products and be able to provide a lot of customer service and support.
Thanks.
So I think I mentioned before, that's kind of the world that I worked in for several years, and it was college textbooks. And I actually sold a personal health book back 30 years ago. So in some ways, I'm not surprised at some of the content because I know what it was at the college level 30 years ago. So, but there are, when you get down to actually looking at things back then, I'm sure a lot have changed, but there's not necessarily a ton of options to fit your specific purpose.
Correct. Most publishers are going to try to write resources so that they do appeal to a broad national audience. So it is definitely some work on our part to go through materials and align them to our district specific curriculum.
And I did, this one was just, well, it's a sensitive topic to begin with, and then it's a college level textbook, and we're giving it to freshmen, so it was just problems all around, but.
And fortunately, they were identified, and I think
yes,
our administration took some pretty
appropriate action.
Appropriate, decisive action that created a solution. And so now we focus on how do we prevent it? How do we get things clarified, and how do we all work together in order? Because I think the board owns some of this too, right? I mean, I think we've got some accountabilities here that we need to button up. So any other comments or discussion?
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to discussion item number 9.05, the Kansas Association of School Boards Conference, November 10th through the 12th.
Just a reminder that the annual KSB conference is coming up in a few weeks, November 10th through the 12th. And I believe there's some information there that kind of gives you some registration information. Rachel and Candy have been working on making sure everybody's signed up. We know that there's a transition because that's right after the election. But we do have, unless you told us no, we do have you signed up. And we also have slots for individuals that, are on the ballot that should the ones that win that night will also have the opportunity to attend that conference and start getting, some more insight into a board member's roles, responsibilities. But again, that's coming up. Candace, Rachel, anything you want to say on that?
I will be contacting some board members about questions that I have about check-in and check-out. But I'm going to do that individually on email rather than the public.
Okay, very good.
And breakout sessions just got posted. So if you're like me, start planning your weekend.
Very good. Moving on to Board of Education work session, Dr. Luttrell.
Just a reminder that again, our work session on the 5th Monday, next Monday, we'll be back again. The two main topics that we have that are in order are these trying to again continue work on the development of a superintendent evaluation tool. And then also a secondary topic could be on succession planning for the district, making sure that the organization is set up for long-term success as individuals come and go. However, those are not necessarily locked in stone, as we heard tonight. If there are we try to keep those to around 2 hours or so from what but if there is information, like I said, the open enrollment, you want us to bring you back some more information, that's an opportunity to do that. If you wanted some information, on the weighted grades, we could, but right now, the two main topics that have been identified are the superintendent evaluation tool development and the succession planning. But if there's something else you'd like, please let me know. That starts at 6 o'clock next Monday night. And again, those work sessions are not typically streamed.
Right. And our board clerk sent out the KSB pilot study materials for superintendent evaluations. Everyone has access to those, and everyone should have access to our current draft model as well. So the rubric, I think, was done in that. The process is where we had a little bit more work to do. So
Do you want that original rubric that we worked on last January? Or are we going to scrap that completely?
it would be the most current revision. I don't remember when we worked on it last.
January, and it was not adopted.
So the most current version of that rubric is what we want.
Okay.
Okay. And there's a process associated with that. That starts at 6 next week. In this place.
Yes.
And with that, board work calendar, I think where we are is board work calendar. So
And that's fluid document. And again, I just adjusted some of that today, trying to shuffle things in and out. We have a busy calendar between now, especially now in the December, and then picking back up in January. And as I said, I know there's, again, trying to, pro opportunity, but if there are, again, every executive leadership team meeting we have, we put this out to make sure that directors know if they have something, they need to get that onto the calendar or get it thrown out so that we can try to see where it might need to be worked in at. And again, and I'm also open to, again, as I learned, if you have ever, again, that's what the work calendar is for. If you have an item that you feel, hey, I'd like to maybe see this get on at some point, like I said, give it, let me know, and I'll put it at the bottom and talk to the rest of the group and see if we can work that in. If we can kind of see if it's something that's pressing that we need to get right away, or if it's something that maybe, hey, maybe, the next time there might be some time that we have some extra minutes, if we could talk about something, we'll try to get that on. But again, that work calendar is there. But you're definitely busy between now and the end of the year.
Very good. Well, thank you. We are adjourned.